Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of What If Deku Became the Gunslinger Hero? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. By now, we probably all know the story of one Midoria Izuku. In a world where superpowers known as quirks are the norm, Midoria was born into the world without one. This became a terrible curse for the young boy in a society that was obsessed about quirks. From the moment his diagnosis became known, Midoria became a virtual pariah. He would be the topic of salacious gossip among the more mean-spirited neighbors. His peers would steer clear of him, not wanting to catch his quirkless disease, and call him all kinds of nasty names. Adults that should have otherwise been important support pillars through Midoriya's development quickly wrote him off as an useless nobody that would never amount to anything. Even his childhood friend, Bakugo Katsuki, someone whom Midoriya had been inseparable with ever since they were babies, turned on him and effectively used him as a punching bag to boost his own ego or just to F with the quirkless Deku, as he called him and was picked up by everyone else. Midoriya would hit the ultimate low when on one innocuous day, that childhood friend suicide-baited him in an act of callous maliciousness after his usual physical torment, and have his fragile dream of becoming a hero destroyed by, ironically, the #1 hero in the country, All Might. From that moment, it would appear that it was all over for Midoriya Izuku. This is where the story deviates. In one universe, Midoriya's luck and fate will finally change when after that devastating meeting with All Might, he saves his childhood friend, ironic, again, from a slime villain that none of the other pro-heroes are able to tackle. All Might witnesses this valiant action, and after cornering Midoriya again later that evening, would renounce his previous statement and declares the boy a true hero. All Might will then give Midoriya his quirk, one for all, and from there, through countless trials and tribulations, Midoriya will rise through the ranks to become the greatest hero that has ever lived. Quite a fairy tale happy ending, isn't it? And terribly convenient as well, don't you think? Of course, we mustn't forget that this is only one possible scenario. There are so many deviations from that critical point on the rooftop where Midoriya's dreams took their final breath. It's a spectrum. Midoriya fades into obscurity, never to be seen again. He falls into villainy where he makes a name for himself as the destroyer of the world. Or he makes a name for himself and changes the world for the better, as a hero in his own right, or a vigilante who is the pride of the people and the scourge of the establishment. In this particular world, our favorite broccoli-haired protagonist doesn't disappear into the unknown. He does become a hero, but not in the way we have come to know he would. And it doesn't involve All Might. Let us begin, shall we? Midoriya Izuku wondered if his day could get any worse. Told to kill himself by his childhood friend Tormentor, almost killed by a slime villain, and had his lifelong dream destroyed by his ultimate idol, All Might, there wasn't really much left for someone like him who had been told for years to give up, or was mocked for holding on to a dream that was deemed all but impossible for someone who didn't have an active quirk factor. That was right. Midoriya didn't have the extra joint in his toe that would signify that he would be left without a quirk. Unfortunately, as the years went by, and with no quirk manifesting, the latest doctor he had seen deduced that he was as good as quirkless. As he walked down the empty street, Midoriya couldn't block out the damning words that All Might had so callously spoken down to him from looping like a broken record in his mind. Be realistic, be realistic. You cannot become a hero without a quirk. Idealism will only get you killed, you should have known that by now. Midoriya so desperately wanted to cry, but he had done so for the entire afternoon, and he simply didn't have the tears left to do so. It only made him choke up and feel as if he was drowning in his despair. He didn't want that, so he forced down his rising emotions with shuddering breaths and continued his way home. Not until he heard loud noises in the distance just when he reached a junction in the road. As far as his memory served him, loud noises usually meant that there was a villain attack somewhere. In this case, literally only a few blocks away. Now, Midoriya was thrown into a quandary. Before today, if there was a villain attack, he would gladly run over to the scene of the chaos to catch the pro-heroes in action. Now though, It only serves as a painful reminder that his dream is now nothing more but broken pieces on the ground. A mere vision of the life that he had always wanted, but never received. Still, something was nudging him towards going to the scene of the attack, like the song of a siren luring sailors to their doom. Midoria thought about it for a moment longer, before deciding to go for it. Picking up his pace, he hurried down the pavement towards the noise, eventually reaching a crowd of curious onlookers being held back by police. Pushing his way to the front, Midoria was greeted by a scene of carnage. Pieces of debris littered the road. Cars were overturned and set aflame. Lampposts have fallen and added to the disarray. Amidst the destruction were about 5 pro-heroes, 3 of which Midoria recognized as Kamui Woods, Death Arms and Me Lady facing off against the exact same slime villain that had almost done him in inside the underpass. Only this time, to Midoriya's horror, his childhood friend Tormentor, Bakugo, was trapped within the villain's gelatinous hold. The first thing that came to his mind was, why in the ever-loving F was no one doing anything at all? Why were they all just standing around, not taking the chances to get Bakugo out? What on earth were they waiting for? His answer came when he overheard someone saying that none of the heroes present had the right quirks to safely extract Bakugo and contain the villain without causing even more damage to the surrounding area. Immediately, Midoriya took offense to that. What do you mean no one had the right quirks? Quirks don't matter in this case. He could easily come up with at least a dozen methods to distract the villain long enough for it to be contained. So the question still remained, why the F was no one doing anything? Surely the heroes and police have the mental capacity to come up with the same methods he could think of in less time, couldn't? Suddenly, the slime villain roared, causing more damage to his surroundings. The watching onlookers reacted, creating a surge in movement that strained the police line holding them back. Midoriya was jostled forward, forcing him to the tarmac at a policeman's feet. Then, there was a clatter nearby. Midoriya looked. Only an arm's length away was the policeman's gun. He didn't know what type of gun it was, given his limited knowledge of firearms, but it didn't matter. As long as it was loaded, it was useful. Midoriya waited until the policeman had moved away enough so that he wouldn't be noticed. When the right moment came, he bolted. Scrambling for the gun, Midoriya grabbed it and hurtled out of the police line straight into the heart of the attack. People began screaming when they noticed him running towards the villain, alerting the police and the heroes of his brazen act. What are you dash? Ignoring everything else, Midoriya raised the gun with both hands and pulled the trigger. There was a split second of silence, followed by a piercing, agonizing, inhuman scream from the slime villain. That was when all hell broke loose. To be continued. Midoriya registered multiple things once he had pulled the trigger. First was the loud blam from the gun firing. Second was the recoil, the gun jerking backwards against his grip. Third was the unholy scream from the slime villain as the bullet pierced into his eye, blood and ocular fluid spurting outwards. Finally, the screams of the onlookers as the villain thrashed about, sending great blobs of slime everywhere indiscriminately. With a stampede on the verge of breaking out, the police doubled their efforts to keep the crowd contained. Acting on instinct, Midoriya aimed the gun and pulled the trigger a second time. The slime villain screamed again, the bullet destroying his other eye. As his thrashing grew even more haphazardly, his grip on Bakugo loosened. Midoriya threw the gun to the side and dashed towards his tormentor. What the F are you doing, Deku? Saving you, you dipshit. Bakugo's eyes widened, never having heard mousy, timid little Deku swear, let alone at him. Midoriya grabbed onto the blonde's exposed arm and pulled with all of his might. Even then, it was a Herculean task to drag the heavier teen out of the slime, especially when the villain realized someone was trying to take his hostage from him. More globules of slime went flying through the air, some hitting Midoriya hard enough to knock him to the side. Undeterred, he got back up and tried pulling Bakugo out, again not helped by the fact that the blonde seemed to be struggling against his victim's grip. The stalemate continued for a few more minutes, and even then, the police and heroes did nothing to help. Midoriya was already growing tired from the continuous exertions. He needed assistance quickly, before he passed out and became the villain's second victim. Detroit Smas. Just like that, there was a great blast of wind and energy, and then everything was spinning. Midoria felt the impact of his body hitting the cracked tarmac. Not too far away, he heard another body hit the road, followed by bits of slime splattering around like raindrops. Pushing himself up, Midoria once again was greeted by the godlike silhouette of All Might, standing proudly with his huge smile overlooking what remained of the slime villain at his feet. Everything is fine. But because I am here. As the #1 hero's signature laugh echoed over the carnage, Midoria released a tired breath. What on earth were you thinking, kid? How could you be so reckless? Midoria kept his eyes closed, trying to keep his rising indignation and anger from erupting. Wrapped in a blanket, he was immediately tended to by paramedics for any injuries he might have sustained from the attack. When he deemed fine, they left him alone, only for the police and pro-heroes Kamui Woods and Death Arms to descend upon him like vultures. Any praise mixed in with the interrogation quickly became a scolding session once it was revealed that Midoriya didn't have a quirk. You don't even have a quirk to protect yourself. You are incredibly stupid to charge head first against the villain. The teen bit the inside of his mouth. He was really trying his best to rein in his mounting temper, but the police and heroes kept going on and on with their harsh, demeaning words and their holier-than-thou attitudes towards him, chipping away at his control. And what gave you the right to shoot a gun? You don't even have a license to even hold it. You should thank your lucky stars that you can't be charged with inappropriate weapon use because you are still a minor. Alright, that may have been true, but this is all just ignoring the main issue at hand. And it only served to weaken Midoriya's control over the rising surge of anger that was beginning to breach his tongue. All it would take is one more crushing comment before the surge of lava spilled over the vent and went racing down the slopes towards total destruction. You are quirkless, you shouldn't even be involved with this, said Kamui Woods reproachfully. Just stay out of the way, and let the professionals deal with it. There was a loud, metaphorical explosion as a mushroom cloud of ash and pumice erupts from the volcano. As the dark cloud of negativity spreads over the soul, the lava that was the anger raced down from the heart to the tongue, lashing and burning anyone unfortunate to be in its path. Midoriya's eyes flashed as he lost control. Yet you lot did nothing, standing around like complete idiots while someone was literally dying right in front of your eyes. Midoriya usually did not swear, and would normally be aghast at such foul language. But he had broken through his reservations. He had enough. He had had it with people telling him that he couldn't do anything because he was quirkless, even if it is to save someone's life. He had absolutely had it with people talking him down with derision and contempt. Now, there would be nothing holding him back. The sheer volume and malice spewing forward had the police officers and heroes flinching, not quite expecting such an explosive response to their rebuke. K-Kid Death Arms tried to interject. No. You lot shut up and think about it. Midoriya continued his vitriol. You have no right to fault me when you could have easily done what I did had you used your brains in the first place. A police officer tried to intervene. Kid, you must understand that Kamui Woods and Death Arms didn't have the right quirks to save your friend. Whether the guy realized he spoke in such a condescending tone or not, Midoriya wasn't taking it sitting down. With veins popping across his temple, he blasted them again. Kamui Woods could have easily made some branches and thrown them into the eyes of the slime villain. They are his weakest points, which I did by shooting them. Death Arms could have easily taken advantage of the distraction to wrench Bakugo from the villain. So, are you telling me that trained professional heroes cannot come up with a solution that an average, quirkless teenager could come up with under pressure? What kind of law enforcement do we have if they are unable to properly use their brains in moments of crisis? Silence permeated except for Midoriya's hard breathing from screaming his lungs out. Both pro-heroes and the police were left stunned at being talked back to so viciously, especially by someone not their superior. Plus, that Midoriya was loud enough to be heard by many members of the public behind the police cordon. In the end, it was the only police officer who had stayed silent and neutral throughout the entire debacle to diffuse the tension hanging over everyone before things overboiled. Kid, why don't you just go home, okay? You're clearly exhausted, and I'm sure your parents are worried about you. Midoriya sighed. Fine, I'll go, but hear this. He threw the blanket onto Kamui Wood's head. You are all nothing but a bunch of FING cowards. Especially you two, Kamui Woods and Death Arms. You two are the absolute FING worst and a stain on the good name of heroism. With one last effort to sneer at the adults, the teen grabbed his bag from nearby and stalked away from the scene, leaving behind heroes and police who didn't quite know how to deal with the recent escalation of verbal assault. It was on his way home did Midoriya finally feel the exhaustion settle upon him. Each step he took was laborious, his limbs felt heavy and his joints scraped against his sockets like sandpaper. He had to take momentary breaks to not wear himself out any further, though he did put in the effort to speed up when he realized he was being followed. Not by a villain or a criminal, but by two people he still didn't want to deal with either way. The first was Bakugo. Thanks to various blind spot mirrors, he spotted the explosive blonde stalking after him like an angry man on the hunt. Midoriya had to duck into shops a few times and detoured into more crowded areas to get his tormentor off his trail, but eventually Bakugo gave up and went off in the opposite direction. Now, Midoriya would have taken the chance to immediately head home if the emaciated skeleton that was All Might hadn't become his second stalker, again noticed by blind spot mirrors. The last thing he wanted now was to sit through another scolding session courtesy of the monster who destroyed his dream, as if rubbing salt into his broken heart and wounded soul. Thus the entire process was repeated, alongside taking confusing directions to get the number one hero off his shadow. By the time All Might gave up and left him alone, Midoriya barely had the energy to walk. Finally, after God knows how long and with the sun already gone below the horizon, Midoriya arrived back at his apartment building. He had no sooner opened the door when he was immediately accosted by someone who he also didn't want to deal with at the moment either. Izuku. Oh my God, where were you? Do you know how late it is now? I saw the news earlier. You made me so dash. Midoriya counted to 10 inside his head, praying to whatever deity who would show pity enough to hear him that he'd be given the strength to not lose his still recovering cool on his mother. She did this more times than he can comfortably count, especially if he had come home looking roughed up, mostly from Bakugo, or if there had been a particularly brutal villain attack that she had somehow came to know. And right now, he was too tired to deal with her bullshit. Mom, it's fine, I'm okay, he barely kept his tone reassuring. It's nothing new. I'm just going to take a shower now. Please do, she agreed a bit too eagerly. You smell quite a bit, and you're covered in dirt. You could fall ill or get an infection dash. Midoriya ignored his mother from that moment, seeking refuge in his bedroom to retrieve a set of fresh clothes. Disappearing into the bathroom right after, he stripped off his dirty uniform, stepped into the bath, and turned on the hot faucet. The shower of steaming water rained down upon him in a gentle massage, washing away the grime and dirt accumulated from the day. Feeling even more lethargic, Midoriya sat down into the tub and leaned back, releasing a tired breath as he just let the water tap onto him repeatedly. There he lay for several minutes, drifting around in his thoughts. His memory returned to the aftermath of the slime villain attack. If he had the energy to do so, he would silently rage and stew over how badly he was treated by the police and the heroes. The nerve that they had to scold and demean him when it was he who basically did the job for them. Sure, All Might may have been the final blow that permanently dealt with the villain, but had he, Midoriya, not done anything, Bakugo would have died and the villain quite possibly would have gone on to cause much more damage than he had already done. Midoriya wiped the water from his face. Now that he was alone to properly think about it, Bakugo was really a nasty, F-ed-up piece of work, wasn't he? Bullying him verbally and physically, subjecting him to endless pain from assaults and explosions, galvanizing the entire school to turn against him like he was some kind of criminal, that all the mocking, stolen belongings, pranks against him, and the teachers either ignoring his suffering or even joining in on the torment, blaming him for whatever sin committed against him. And that unforgivable crime of suicide baiting. Why on earth did he still call that BSRD by that endearing nickname from better years long past? What was wrong with him? He sighed, he knew better now. But there was one pressing question. He was left with this realization. What was he going to do with Bakugo in the coming days? He still had to go to school with the BRD after the weekend was over, and be subjected to the hell he had been put through for the past decade. He needed some form of protection against the torment. But what could he use? Strength-wise, Midoria could only laugh at himself. He would only be signing his death warrant if he were to go into physical combat with Bakugo. He would need some kind of weapon, something powerful that would give him a boost, raising his platform to that of Bakugo's or even higher. He remembered firing the gun that took out the slime villain's eyes. He didn't really think about it other than pulling the trigger and feeling the recoil of the firearm during the heat of the moment, but now that he had calmed down somewhat, he could think back to that crucial second with more clarity. The noise of the bullet leaving the barrel and the blowback. Midoria couldn't quite pinpoint it, but he felt a sting of exhilaration from the momentary shot of power that he wielded. For the first time, he wasn't a useless Deku, he was the catalyst to saving someone's life, even if that someone was a scourge of a monster that didn't have an ounce of human decency in his explosion-addled brain. The gun, that he held for only a short while, gave him so much more power than most quirks he could think of. It was clear what he needed to get. Yet, at the same time, Midoria knew he had to think realistically. You all might know. Stop, don't think about that BS now. Focus Izuku. As much as he wanted to go and buy a gun now and rid himself of his problems for good, he knew that on moral and lawful grounds, he couldn't do that. He would be no better than those raving lunatics who went around massacring people for fun before the onset of quirks in America and other foreign countries. No, he had to be smart about it. He needed to go about things the right way. Midoria carefully stood back up. He'd best finish his shower properly, so that he had time to go about planning his next steps. He waited until his mother had gone to bed before sneaking to the family computer. Booting it up, Midoria went online to search about legal gun ownership in Japan. Sifting through the results, Midoria made some quick notes in one of his empty notebooks. HM.SO gun ownership laws haven't changed much since the pre-Quirk era. I have to be either in law enforcement or a pro-hero to be licensed to carry a gun. Well, that FANDSEKS. Looks like I can't legally get a gun given I'm only turning 15 this year and that I'm quirkless too. Deciding to switch tactics, Midoria turned his search on heroes who use guns in their line of work. Not surprisingly, the engine came up with less than 10 in the prior 20 years. In the professional world of heroes, having a flashy and/or powerful quirk outshines something that seemed comparatively weaker like a gun. A quick scan through hero forums echoed this sentiment, with many scoffing at the idea of carrying a firearm in the line of work, seeing it as pointless since quirks could do a much better job. Midoria might disagree, but that wasn't the point here. Going back to the list, at the top was the pro-hero Snipe, who also works at UA as a teacher. The cowboy hero uses modified guns which are in tune with his quirk, honing, which gives him impeccable aim at specific targets. By far, he is the best person to go to when it comes to firearms usage in a practical setting. Especially besides being a pro-hero, Snipe's family runs a weapons dealership and shooting range in Tokyo itself. Midoria scoffed. The likelihood of anyone of a reputable standing, let alone a pro-hero, who would even deign a quirkless person like him a second look was next to none. He wouldn't put it past a pro-hero like Snipe to have prejudice against quirkless individuals. After all, since Yui made that big show of being the first hero school in the country to lift the ban on quirkless applicants 5 years ago, not a single one had attempted to take on the school's extremely quirk-biased entrance exam, let alone become a student of the academy. So openings through legal and established means were almost non-existent for someone like him. What were his available options? An unsettling feeling descended upon Midoria. He wasn't entirely comfortable with resorting to illegal means to protect himself. It was a dangerous balancing act. For the moment he was caught, he could kiss his dreams of becoming a hero goodbye. And his mother would literally lock him in his room like an animal for the rest of his life once he was released from whatever legal custody he was to serve. But at the same time, it's not like he has much of a choice here, didn't he? Sighing to himself, Midoria opened another search window. He'll see what options were available to him. If there were truly none even in the gray area sector, then he'll resort to the illegal means. It was after another hour of scanning through listings and search results, Midoria narrowed down to 3 possible shooting ranges and clubs. Two of them were outside of the greater Tokyo region, so they were out, as it won't be financially feasible for him to make continuous journeys there and back in the long run. Furthermore, only individuals who were 18 and older were even allowed through the door. Striking those two off, Midoriya checked out the last available listing. It was located in Kanagawa. Midoriya wondered if this was a strange connection to Snipe, since it was the hero's home prefecture, in an obscure warehouse and operated 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. No age line was specified on the club's website, though it did state that only those who are 18 and above are allowed to handle guns, in line with the national firearms law. By right, that should have been the final nail in the coffin for that option. However, based on patron reviews on the club's website, Midoriya had the distinctive sense that the operators often turned a blind eye on the patron's age. Nothing was explicitly revealed, but judging from how the reviews were written indicated that every now and then, the club would allow someone below the age of 18 to handle a gun. It might not be completely ethical or legal, but compared to other possibly shadier organizations out there, this one might not be so bad. Midoriya wrote down the address of the club and turned off the computer. Thank heavens it was the weekend tomorrow, and all he needed to tell his mom was that he was planning to hang out at the local mall for pretty much the entire day. Now though, he needed his sleep. The train ride to Kanagawa took about 2 hours from Mizudofu. Alighting at the station, Midoriya emerged from the subway into an industrial estate that seemed to be stuck in between two worlds. Many of the factories and workshops were up and running despite it being the weekend, yet there were more that were shuttered or abandoned and left to corrode under the elements. It took a bit of navigation through the blocks of industry, either working away or sitting idle to rot, to find the warehouse, which to no surprise, was located in the dilapidated section of the estate. Despite its relatively rundown state, it was clear that there have been efforts to maintain the building, at least structurally, though it did still fit in quite well with the rest of the abandoned, rusting infrastructure surrounding it. Sliding the somewhat rusty door open, Midoriya entered the warehouse. Immediately to his right, there was a door leading to what he assumed was an office. Down the short corridor, there was another door where the muffled sounds of bullets being fired echoed from the other side. Must be the actual shooting range. The range itself kind of reminded Midoriya of a bowling alley. At one end, there was a kiosk with an attendant manning the counter, shelves holding dozens of firearms across many varieties. A series of worn sofas, chairs and tables separated the kiosk from the firing lanes, which had separating panels marking out each lane. Everything was well lit, and there were a considerable number of people inside. All of the lanes were occupied, as were the furniture, save for one armchair in the middle of the range. Midoriya made a beeline for the chair, claiming it before anyone else could. Ignoring the slight pricks from the cracked leather, he took out a pair of earplugs and set them into his ears. Then out came a fresh notebook and pencil, and he began observing the people at the firing lanes. Now, you might ask, why didn't he just go up to the kiosk and ask for lessons on how to handle a gun safely? While the range does offer lessons according to the website, they were expensive, and he didn't have the funds up front to pay for them without putting himself into debt for the rest of the month. He still needed to eat, after all, and asking his mother for an increase in allowance was out of the question because the moment she found out where the money was going, it was straight into the room with the door locked. At the moment, observing, as he had done for years now, was the only viable option. Midoriya scribbled away, alternating between his notebook and a particular gentleman with scales running down his incredibly muscled arms. He analyzed everything about the man, his posture, the way he handled the gun, how fast he fired each bullet, and his overall behavior as he finished one magazine. While he may not be able to get physical experience with a gun yet, Midoriya reasoned that how one handled themselves when holding a gun was just as important. The man he was observing was an exemplary example. He carried himself with confidence and strength. Nothing about him indicated weakness and hesitance even when holding a dangerous weapon that could take someone's life in an instant. This man was everything Midoriya was not, something he took note of seriously. When the time came for him to hold a gun, he needed to not show any weakness lest the enemy take advantage of that. Midoriya would ultimately spend the entire day at the range, not moving from his spot except to eat at an in-house cafe for lunch. Eventually, he left just before 5 in the evening to catch the train back to Mizudofu. In his mind, today was productive. Besides the man who had inexplicably become a role model for him, he observed the other patrons just as extensively. How they carried themselves was spread over a spectrum. Some were as confident as the scaled man, while others were not so confident. Some fired their bullets steadily, while others shot more haphazardly. Overall, it was a good learning experience. Now, though, he had to return to reality. With a quiet sigh, Midoria departed the range for the train station. Midoria would make another trip down to the shooting range the next day, though things would naturally come to a head when school reopened on Monday. Bakugo, it seemed, had become even more prickly and abrasive after the slime villain incident. It seemed that even breathing was enough for the explosive blonde to viciously accost him with his wrath. Although that may have also been because Midoriya gave him the slip in the aftermath of the attack. It started when Midoriya was innocently reviewing his notes for the lesson after homeroom. He had heard the sound of stomping approaching his desk, giving him the chance to steal his reaction from flinching when Bakugo slammed a hand onto his desk. "Deku, what kind of bullshit do you think you have the FNG nerve to pull?" Midoriya had to push down the memory of said blonde cruelly telling him to kill himself the week before. Even if it was his instinct to cower and curl into himself under Bakugo's increasingly volatile glare, he maintained his expression in a carefully blank, cool look. "I saved your effin' butt from dying, that's what I did, you illegitimate son of a motherfucking where. I should be surprised that you are so ungrateful that someone saved your pathetic existence, but I honestly am not. Now if you'll please excuse me, Bugu, I wish to be left in peace." Midoriya's response silenced the entire room. Everyone, including Bakugo, expected the usually skittish quirkless loser to spiral into a storm of stuttering apologies and frantic posturing, not snark back with expletive-riddled coldness. For Bakugo, though, the shock did not last long as his fiery temper exploded. "You think you can talk down to me like that, you worthless Deku? I'll show you your place." The explosions came, and Midoriya's natural instincts took over. The teen dodged the flaming fist, grabbed the legs of his desk, and with all the strength he could muster, brained his tormentor right in the head. Bakugo fell to the floor with a crash, as the onlookers shrieked and stepped away from the burgeoning fight. Bakugo screamed bloody murder, and tried to attack Midoriya again, only to be bludgeoned in the temple by one of desk legs. It quickly became a back and forth between bully and victim. Midoriya's consciousness slipped into the back burner, his instincts and emotions taking center stage as he fought back for the first time in years. Sure, many explosions did manage to hit him, but any pain he felt was barely registered as adrenaline pumped through his nerves. He didn't care for his surroundings, he only wanted to protect himself. The room shook with each blast, sending bits of building plaster down from the ceiling. Even then, the two still went at it, unaware that one of the braver onlookers had braced the explosions to run out of the classroom, returning a short while later with the homeroom teacher. "What is going on here?" Midoriya was just about to dive a blow onto Bakugo's head when he realized the teacher was there. "It was Midoriya," yelled one student. "He just started attacking Bakugo out of nowhere," cried another. Midoriya dropped his mangled desk with a loud clatter. Of course his classmates would turn on him even though it was Bakugo who started the entire confrontation in the first place. He sighed. There was no point in defending himself since he was virtually outnumbered here. "Someone go take Bakugo-kun to the infirmary," said the teacher, "and Midoriya, report straight to the principal's office. I can't believe that you will act so deplorably with your classmates." Ignoring all the whispers, snickers and jibes aimed at him, Midoriya dusted off his uniform, grabbed his bag and stalked out of the classroom. Along the way, his thoughts began to fester. "I'll kill them all. When I get a gun, I'll return and shoot every single one of them dead. Including Bakugo, he'll be the first to go. I'll make sure he dies painfully. Then I'll murder every single one of those motherfuckers before I dash." Midoriya stopped. After a moment of just standing there, he sighed and carried on. "Stop it. Don't think such thoughts. If I really kill them all, I would be no better than a villain. You're better than this, Midoriya. Don't stoop down to their level. You know better than that fucker of a teacher, you know you weren't the one to start the fight. It's just that everyone hates you because of Dash." Midoriya stopped again. For the second time, he sighed and continued on. I truly hate that motherfucking Bakugu. When he finally arrived at the principal's office, Midoriya was made to wait because, apparently, the principal had urgent matters to attend to. Midoriya wasn't entirely sure if they were simply bullshitting that excuse or what, since the principal has been known to spout Quirkless slurs on a daily basis. So far, none had been at him since he had never interacted with the man until now, but that didn't mean he wasn't aware of it. Especially since the meaner students couldn't really keep their gloating mouths shut that the principal had given them free rein to say whatever they wanted against the Quirkless. Yet there was a plus from this treatment. As the minutes dragged on and no indication came to enter the office, Midoriya had time to think. At the rate things were going, the likelihood of being expelled was extremely high. Once again, going back to the principal's quirkist attitude and given that he did beat a number on Bakugu, even though it was in self-defense. Furthermore, he was just so tired with this environment. Virtually everyone repulsed him, the teachers wanted nothing to do with him, and the few quirkless students in Aldra kept to themselves so tightly they might as well have not existed. The entire school was a toxic wasteland. Why on earth would he still want to linger around in such a poisonous place where his very safety was constantly threatened daily? It's all because of Bakugu. He is the reason the entire school is against me. He'll be the first to die. I'll make sure I pump his effing body with bullets before I dash. Midoriya hit himself lightly. Stop that. I know I hate Bakugu, but murder is wrong. I'll be vindicated somehow, just not with shooting him to death. Now though, he needed to focus. It would be another 15 minutes before he would be notified to enter the principal's office. Not even bothering to knock, Midoriya stepped inside, facing a pig-looking man. No, seriously, the man had the features of a pig, nose, ears and everything, with a balding head and a beer belly so severe it couldn't be that healthy. Actually no, it wasn't healthy at all. As was the weird smell radiating from the as if he hadn't showered in days. Midoriya wrinkled his nose, but otherwise made no change in expression as he faced the principal. I heard about what you did to Bakugu, boy. I know, that's why I'm getting straight to the point, Midoriya interrupted. From the way things are going to go, you're going to expel me, because you obviously think quirkless students are just a waste of time and don't deserve an education, and you don't want anyone else getting in way of your hopes that Bakugu gets into Yui Academy. Yes, I'm calling you out as a quirkist, principal, and no, I don't give a flying F about respect. Luckily for you, I do not wish to stay a moment longer in this hellhole myself. So to make everyone's lives easier, give me the withdrawal papers, and we will never have to see each other's faces again. The pigman sat there in silence for several moments, before his beady little eyes blinked. He leaned forward, and Midoriya had to physically restrain himself from outwardly reeling at the foul odor. You do know you need your parents' signature, right? Surely you should know that. Midoriya recognized the condescending tone anywhere, but he remained unfazed. I do know, and I can sign it. I know my mom's signature. Now hurry up with the papers. I don't want to be here any longer than I have to. It spoke a lot about the man's contempt for the quirkless when he didn't even question that Midoriya could forge his mother's signature. The pig just produced the documents and all but ordered him to fill it and sign. Midoriya did so, and within 3 minutes, he was no longer a student of Aldra. As Midoriya opened the door, the principal had a parting shot. Wonder why all those quirkless sheets don't do what he did. The teen said nothing, closing the door behind him. He sighed. First things first, get out of the school grounds. Freedom, that was something Midoriya never expected to feel on a Monday morning as he left the gates of Aldra Middle School for the last time. When the day started, he thought it was just going to be a continuation of the living hell he had been subjected to for years. Now, just a few hours later, the chains had been cast off, and he was free. Sure, there was his mother to consider, but given how he has given her the dupe so far, Midoriya figured she won't be a problem for the time being. Back to the moment now though. He was free to do whatever he wished, so what should he do now? Midoriya thought about it. There was nothing he wanted to do here. In Mizudafu, and he couldn't go home yet. He knew his mother hasn't left the apartment for work at this time, and for sure he doesn't want to explain to the woman why he was home so early. How about a trip to the shooting range in Kanagawa? He nodded to himself. That could work. A 2-hour-long train ride later, and Midoriya returned to the industrial estate that he frequented during the past weekend. As it was a weekday, the estate was even busier than when he last visited, though the abandoned factories and workshops still looked as dreary and miserable as they were previously. The workers going about their business paid no attention to the scrawny, green-haired teenager wandering the streets towards the desolated section of the estate. Midoriya arrived at the range with no further trouble, slipping inside unnoticed by anyone. The range had fewer patrons this time round, so the sound of gunfire wasn't as loud. Midoriya took the exact same worn-out armchair and fished out his notebook, sinking into his analytical mode for the next couple of hours. He took a break for lunch, before returning to his scribbling for another hour or so, until the call of nature forced him back into awareness. He didn't trust anyone to leave his belongings alone here, so packing away his notebook and pencil, Midoriya picked up his bag and retreated to the bathroom before any embarrassing mistakes could be made. Several minutes in a cubicle and a flush later, Midoriya emerged. After washing his hands, he dried them off and headed for the door, only to hear a loud bang echo from the other side of it. It didn't sound like gunfire, more like a door slamming open. Voices could then be heard, some were shouting, followed by objects flying. Then came laughter. What the dash? Midoriya carefully opened the door and peeked outside. He blanched. Oh, if in hell. It was a villain attack hostage situation. All of the patrons were on their knees with their hands up in surrender, looking quite terrified. In front of them were two individuals, both male. One was levitating a ball of guns fused together, while the other was holding his own firearm and aimed at the patrons. The pair were laughing, reveling in the power they now exuded over the defenseless, who flinched when the firearm was aimed their way. Midoriya quietly closed the door and considered his options. I can't get through without being spotted. I need to find another way out. Scanning the bathroom, his eyes focused on a set of windows directly above the cubicles. They were rather dirty, quite rusty, and honestly looking quite precarious in their slots. It seemed that one push was all it needed to knock the windows out of their frames. As much as he would not like to touch the disgusting glass, Midoriya knew he didn't have a choice here. Getting inside a cubicle, he climbed on top of the toilet bowl, reached up towards the window, and pushed hard against the glass pane. Just as he had expected, the window broke free of its frame and disappeared from view. Hearing the shatter of glass outside, Midoriya carefully grasped the frame and lifted his body up through the opening. It required quite a bit of effort and maneuvering, since Midoriya's body was not used to such exertion and the frame didn't completely accommodate his size, but managed to squeeze through in the end and fall down to the pavement outside. Picking himself up and dusting his uniform off, Midoriya quickly assessed the situation. In the distance, he could hear shouts, explosions, and other loud noises. Again, his memory deduced it to be a villain attack, this time of a significant scale since he believed that the two villains holding the patrons hostage are part of a bigger group that was attacking the industrial estate. No doubt, the pro-heroes would already be here handling the invasion or at least on their way over. Midoriya went through his thoughts quickly. The two villains in the range must have fled from the working side of the estate to escape the heroes, bursting into the range to hide. It just so happened that one of the villains had the luck of a magnetic quirk or a gravitational one, allowing him to pull all the guns towards him and leaving the patrons defenseless. He considered making a dash towards the main attack site to warn the heroes of the hostage situation, only to find out that there wasn't going to be enough time. Because the doors were left open, the stomach-dropping sound of a gunshot reverberated through the air, followed by screams. Midoriya rushed back into the range, mindful not to make a sound. Peering back inside, he blanched at the sight of one patron lying sprawled on the ground, clutching a bullet wound to the shoulder in an attempt to stop the blood spilling out and staining the floor. One of the villains laughed. "This is what you get for trying to make a run at us. Now be nice little hostages and stay down." Midoriya had to duck back into the hallway to control his breathing. "Okay, Izuku, you need to think quickly. The heroes are not going to get here fast enough. You need to intervene, but how to do so without getting shot yourself? Come and think. Another gunshot struck him from his thoughts, followed by more screaming. Midoriya took a deep breath. There's nothing to this, I can only save everyone by leveling the playing field here. I need a gun, but where can I get one? Literally the only place available where he could attempt to find one without being shot was the office down the corridor. Hoping that he won't be too late, Midoriya hurried to the office as quietly as possible. Inside was a mess of papers, boxes, files and binders containing who knows what just thrown across desks with computers, printers, photocopiers and fax machines. Not quite sure where to start, Midoriya went for the desks, pulling out drawers and rifling through the contents for a gun. When nothing came up, he went through the overall mess in the room, pushing items aside and digging through piles of junk for anything that can be used to take down the villains. Finally, buried deep in a box full of yellowing paper, was a gun. Again, Midoriya didn't know what kind of gun it was, but he didn't care either way, though it did look similar to the police officer's gun he borrowed last Friday. And it was heavy, hopefully that meant it was loaded too. Hurrying out of the office, Midoriya crouched by the door just as another gunshot echoed through the range. The teen cursed inwardly, seeing another patron fall to the ground. It appeared that the villains were now taking random shots at the hostages simply for the fun of it, if their raucous, gleeful laughter served as any harrowing indication. Okay, no time to waste, I gotta get this right. Flicking off the safety of the gun, he learned that from observations of past patrons, Midoriya snuck into the range, keeping low all the time. Hiding behind a pot plant next to the kiosk counter, he peered around it, focusing on the gun-toting villain's legs. Aiming the gun forward, Midoriya braced himself and pulled the trigger. The villain screamed, dropping his gun as he collapsed to the floor, blood spurting from the wound on his left thigh. His comrade spun around, losing control of his quirk and sending the ball of guns clattering to the floor. He grabbed one gun from the ball and fired at Midoriya. The teen dove behind the counter, bullets ricocheting off the floor where he stood only second prior. Rapidly standing up, Midoriya aimed the gun and fired twice. Bim bim. The first bullet knocked the gun out of the villain's hand, while the second punched into the man's chest, dangerously close to his heart. The villain crumpled to the ground, body twitching. Midoriya lowered his gun, breathing hard from the race of adrenaline sending his heart into overdrive. In his recovery, he did not notice the remaining villain grabbing his gun and aiming it straight towards him. Kid, watch out, dash. Bim bim bim. After that, came the thud of a body hitting the ground, and that of a gun clattering out from a hand. The watching hostages stared at the lifeless body, blood spurting liberally from the bullet wound right in between the eyes. Midoriya almost slipped into catatonia, cheeks slightly grazed from the bullet whittling past, his hands shaking with the gun still smoking lightly. When the villain took a shot at him, he dodged, jumped onto the countertop and fired back in self-defense. In no way, shape or form had he intended to kill the villain. But there was the corpse, lying flat on its back, blood staining the floor as the life it once held faded into the void. There was no denying it, he had taken a life. Nobody moved, the shock from the sudden escalation of brutality cementing them to their exact positions. Several moments passed, which felt like an eternity, before someone tried to speak. Kid. You? Freeze. Everyone put your hands up. The sudden interruption of an unfamiliar voice forced everyone to comply, including Midoriya, gun still in hand as he snapped back into reality. Police and pro-heroes alike swarmed into the range, the former with their own guns at the ready and the latter with their quirks. In the momentary panic, Midoriya failed to notice that the Snipe was among the heroes present, his own modified gun at the ready to take down the suspected villains. The police aimed their weapons at Midoriya, one of them, who had the head of a cat, ordering, "You with the gun, put down your weapon, and kick it towards us." The teen did as he was told, climbing down from the counter, placing the gun on the floor and kicking it towards an officer. The officer picked it up and placed it in a Ziploc bag provided by his colleague. Restrain the suspect. Another police officer produced a pair of HNDCFFS and went behind Midoriya, locking his wrists in place. One of the hostages shouted, "What are you doing? The kid didn't do anything wrong. He saved all of us." Yeah. Release him, The hostages began shouting over one another at the police. To the side, Midoria felt his heart burst with emotion. No one has ever stood up for him before, and to witness such support firsthand was immensely overwhelming. Though, as his mind threw in a downer, they probably thought he had a quirk that gave him an ability over guns and aiming, not considering for a second that he was quirkless. Either way, he wasn't going to blurt out that incriminating detail. The cat-headed officer seemed to consider things for a moment, before turning to his colleague handcuffing Midoria. Release him, but make sure he doesn't do anything stupid. The cuffs came off. Take him to the cruiser, cat officer continued. We need to question him back at the station. Wait, Officer San, Midoria spoke up. Can I go retrieve my belongings from the toilet? Again, the cat officer thought about it for a second. Very well. Officer Nakamura, escort the suspect to the toilet and back. Nakamura saluted. Taking Midoria by the arm, he led him towards the bathroom and went inside together. The pair returned a few moments later with Midoriya's backpack. Cat officer then ordered his colleague to take Midoria to the police cruiser waiting outside. As they departed, the teen failed to notice Snipe watching him go with a thoughtful look hidden behind his gas mask. All Midoria could think of once he had slid into the back seat of the cruiser and the door closed was just how much longer would he have his freedom. Unless something miraculous and unexpected happened, well, let's just say his mother, should he even call her that anymore, would never let him live his own life again. Midoria shuddered at the thought. To be continued. There was nothing for the pro-hero Snipe to believe that anything out of the ordinary would happen once the school day ended on Friday. The general education students under his care bore no indication that the status quo had changed. They had been exemplary students who, mostly, didn't give him any unnecessary trouble during school hours. Once the students were dismissed with the final bell, Snipe carried out his routine of retreating to the staff offices to get some work done and to perhaps socialize with his colleagues for a bit. Snipe had been doing this throughout his tenure in Yui, so again, nothing out of the ordinary. As was his commute home back to his apartment in Kanagawa. There were no villain attacks, no petty or violent crime taking place. It was all very normal and ordinary. It was when he was just sitting down to dinner when things started to shift in a new direction, courtesy of his phone ringing. When he checked the caller ID, it was from Nezu. Hello. Snipe-san. I hope I'm not calling you at a bad time? No, it's fine. I was just sitting down to dinner. How can I help ya, principal? I would highly suggest you turn on your local news channel. There's an interesting story that had just taken place in Mizudafu. Here, confusion slipped into Snipe's tone. Why would I be interested in something happening in another city? Trust me, you'll definitely find it interesting. Snipe was still skeptical, but Nezu was by far the smartest creature he had ever known. If Nezu said there was something that might interest him, there could be credence to that statement. So putting his dinner to one side, the cowboy hero grabbed the remote, turned the TV on, and switched to the local news station. And for those of you who are just joining us here on channel Kanagawa News at 6, we bring you the aftermath of a villain attack in Mizudafu City where All Might himself made an appearance towards the end to apprehend the villain. The villain in question, who was composed entirely of a slime-like material, had taken a middle school student hostage in broad daylight. When law enforcement and pro-heroes arrived at the scene, they were unable to deal with the villain without posing a risk to the student. Then, as our camera on the ground managed to capture, another student, possibly from the same school, broke out of the crowd with gun in his hand, no less, and fired 2 bullets into the villain's eyes. The teen then recklessly jumped into the fray to save his friend, just as All Might made an unexpected appearance to save the day. Snipe almost dropped the remote. What at the... The anchor continued. While in normal circumstances this would have led to the teen being arrested for illegal gun usage, eyewitnesses told our reporter on the ground that the situation took an unexpected turn when pro-heroes Kamui Woods and Death Arms alongside personnel from the police force interrogated the teen for his reckless actions. What we are about to play on the screens is the teen's response to the interrogation, which has also been censored to protect the ears of our younger viewers. Censored. The screen switched to slightly shaky footage. Snipe watched the teen get berated by the heroes and police. Then came the explosion. Yet you lot did nothing, standing around like complete idiots while someone was literally dying right in front of your bleep eyes. I can see why now. No. You lot shut up and think about it. You have no right to fault me when you could have easily done what I did had you used your bleep brains in the first place. Snipe really had to hand it to the kid. For being so scrawny he was able to pack quite the verbal punch. The teen then went on a caustic run-through of how Kamui Woods and Death Arms could have saved the hostage, before ending with, "Are you telling me that trained professional heroes cannot come up with a solution that an average, quirkless teenager could come up with under pressure? What kind of law enforcement do we have if they are unable to properly use their brains in moments of crisis?" Here, Snipe dropped his remote. If there was one thing he did not expect the teen to be, was him being quirkless. When the anchor was reading the bulletin, the screen was superimposed by a clip of said teen firing the gun. Having handled guns ever since his quirk manifested, Snipe had a critical eye for a person's stance and posture when pulling the trigger. Analyzing the teen, the masked cowboy had believed the kid had some kind of quirk that improved his aim or at the very least made him confident enough to properly hold a dangerous weapon. Never did he expect to discover that the kid was quirkless. Not that he had anything against the quirkless, it was just unexpected. The news anchor continued about how, in a surprising move, the teen was not arrested for illegal firearms use and just told to go home by one of the police officers. The teen did so, but not before delivering a parting shot that was also caught on camera. "Fine, I'll go, but hear this. You are all nothing but a bunch of bleep cowards. Especially you two, Kamui Woods and Death Arms, you two are the absolute bleep worst and a stain on the good name of heroism." The clip continued to play, as the news station's reporter repeatedly called out to the retreating teen for a word or two, to no avail. The screen then switched back to the anchor. "As it is, we at Channel Kanagawa News have no details on who this teen is, or his motive for using a gun to fight the villain. It remains to be seen whether he will strike again, or fade into the background from public attention." The anchor shifted some papers, also happening within the hour, the dash. Snipe tuned out the rest of the broadcast as it moved away from the story that had his attention. It took a few moments for the masked cowboy to snap out of his stupor to realize he had been inadvertently putting his boss on hold. As if hearing Snipe pick up his phone again, Nezu spoke. "I think we can both agree that the boy is quite the interesting character, don't you think so, Snipe-san?" "I have to agree with you on that, Principal." Nezu chuckled. "I knew you would. So tell me, what are your thoughts about the boy?" Here, Snipe took a moment to think about it. "I thought he had a quirk at first. The way he handled the gun was almost on par with a seasoned shooter, so I thought he had a quirk similar to mine or one that involved firearms. But then the kid shouted that he was quirkless, which not only blew my mind, it made me realize how much of a well-trained marksman the kid is. That, or boiling it down to sheer dumb luck." "Indeed. But even if it was luck, even I would be hard-pressed to get a clean shot into the slime villain's eyes if you were to give me a gun in the heat of the moment. This boy clearly has considerable aim, I might say. But I digress. What I am interested in now, though, is what are you planning to do about it?" Snipe started at this. Pardon? Surely you're not going to just let this boy go to waste?" Nezu asked rhetorically. You saw how angry he was over being looked down at simply for being quirkless. And he is extremely adept with a gun. When you think about it, Snipe-san, a quirkless teenager harboring righteous hatred for the world, and he knows how to shoot a target. Doesn't that sound like a ticking time bomb about to explode? It was unexpected, but Snipe quickly understood his boss' logic here. He was not blind to the discrimination and bullying those with weak or villainous quirks, and especially those who were quirkless, faced on a daily basis. The quirkless unemployment rate was endemic, and the majority of quirkless youths have either attempted or successfully died by suicide before the age of 18. These unsettling facts often went unreported or covered up by the media and the government, as Nezu told the staff before as a topic of conversation. The kid on TV, no doubt, had gone through a terrible existence, and probably saw firearms as his only means of protection. But that was a slippery slope, Snipe knew. The kid's hatred for the world could easily result in him taking matters into his own hands. In an act of vengeance, It was only too easy for him to go to a crowded place, pull out any firearm, and rain a hailstorm of bullets upon the innocent masses, their only crime being part of the society that destroyed his life. Snipe shuddered. It reminded him of the many gun violence cases he had read about or personally witnessed back in the States. When they weren't caused by villains, it was usually disenfranchised individuals or groups who were abused and destroyed by society. You get my point, don't you? I do, Principal. But what can I do? I don't know who the kid is, and there was nothing on TV about his identity. That may be true, Snipe-sen. Nezu seemed unfazed, but I have a strong feeling that this boy will pop up again in the coming days. What makes you so sure, Principal? Call it an intuition of sorts, my friend. But anyway, I won't disturb your evening any longer, Snipe-san. All I'm asking of you is to keep a lookout for this boy, and I'll do my part too. You take care, and I'll see you on Monday. Take care, Principal. With that, the line went dead. Putting his phone down to the side, Snipe fell into deep thought. It was not mentioned explicitly during the conversation, but if fate were to play things out a certain way, he could be taking an apprentice under his wing in the coming days. If things were to turn out like that, it would be an entirely new experience for the masked cowboy. He had never personally trained someone before on proper gun use, as virtually all of the patrons at his family-owned shooting range were at the very least competent with firearms or professional markspeople at best. But Snipe was all for the challenge. That itself was nothing new. His entire life ever since moving to Japan was a challenge, but he had made it this far and he wasn't going to stop now. Even the unknowns of whether the kid would accept the offer of training or not did not deter the masked cowboy. When he really thought about it, it would be for the betterment of not only the kid, but for the general public as a whole for the kid to accept. Again, due to gun violence. And the possible descent into villainy. Sure, quirkless villains often do not last long, but one with a gun? Snipe didn't want to go down that rabbit hole. So there's that. Now came the issue of finding the kid. All he had was Nezu's advice, which he would take seriously, for sure. He just wished he had more to go by other than a shaky clip from a news station. Oh well, sometimes you don't win at life. He'll just keep his eyes open. Anyway, his dinner's getting cold, and the next episode of that American drama series he really enjoyed should be coming up soon. Despite the change of events that Friday evening, the weekend would ultimately also pass without incident for Snipe. During his patrols around Yokohama, the city where he lived, he kept an eye out for any teenagers with curly forest green hair with black highlights, a defining detail he got from the news clip. But while he spotted a good number of individuals with green hair, they either had the wrong shade, wrong style, or just didn't look like the kid at all. He even took a day trip up to Mizudafu to see if he would have any luck. As it was, he had none. Short of asking around if anyone knew the kid, which would only make him out to be some kind of creepy stalker, Snipe had no other ideas. On the other hand, Nezu had a bit more success. Through a search of all the middle schools in the Mizudafu area, the principal was able to narrow down the possible identities to 5 likely candidates, all quirkless. However, there wasn't much to go upon from this telling detail. All schools were closed during the weekend, so it was impossible for Nezu to contact the administration to verify whether or not their student was involved with the slime villain attack on Friday. So it boiled down to a waiting game. Nezu would call around once the new week came, while Snipe continued his life while keeping an eye out for any of the 5 teens. Then came Monday. The morning started off routinely, breakfast, followed by the commute to U. Once again, no sighting of the green-haired kid. Homeroom came and went, then Snipe went to teach Quirk Physics to Class 1B. There was no Class 1A this year, courtesy of Aizawa expelling the entire class on the first day of school. In some twisted manner, it was a blessing since it was one less class to teach and less work to be done as a result, but Snipe wasn't going to let anyone know that. That being said, it was halfway through the lesson with Class 1B when things started shifting in a completely different direction. Just as he was explaining the numbers and equations behind the laws of gravity in different Quirk scenarios, an announcement came over the intercom. Could Snipe-san please report to the principal's office as soon as possible? Thank you. As the class turned to one another with confused looks, Snipe addressed them, "We will see how things go." If I do not return in 15 minutes, a substitute teacher will take over my place. In the meantime, continue reading up on page 25 and work on the questions in the worksheet I gave out earlier. Snipe hurried out of the classroom and quickly went up to Nezu's office. Principal, I'm here. What's the matter? Ah, good timing, Snipe-san, Nezu chirped. I just received a phone call from the Kanagawa police. They need your assistance in stopping a large villain attack happening right now in an industrial estate in Yokohama. Right now? Yes, right now. Take as long as you are needed. I'll arrange for substitutes to take over your classes while you're gone. Oh, and do keep me updated on the outcome if you are able to. I will, Principal. I'll be off now. The attack was well underway by the time Snipe arrived at the industrial estate. The entrance had been cordoned off, a police line holding back the gathering crowd of curious onlookers and news crews eager for a story to report for the afternoon broadcast. Going up to the police line, Snipe flashed his hero license and was allowed through. He was greeted by a scene of chaos, loud bangs and explosions of things being blown up or knocked around, other pro-heroes battling the supposed villains, shouts and screams commingled together in one indecipherable bedlam of noise. Not wasting a second, Snipe flipped the safety pins of his guns and dove right into the action. Many bullets and a lot of physical fighting later, most of the villains, all part of a notorious underground gang, were subdued and waiting to be transported. However, the heroes quickly found out that 2 more members of the gang were still unaccounted for. That was when the distant sound of bullets being fired echoed throughout the estate. Snipe joined a hastily formed group of heroes and police officers in scoping out the source of the gunfire. Eventually, they reached a nondescript-looking, abandoned warehouse, just as the noise of 3 more bullets being fired in rapid succession emanated from the ajar door. Fearing the worst, police officer Sansa wasted no time in storming the warehouse, leading the group into what appeared to be a shooting range when Snipe had the chance to figure out the location. Freeze! Everyone put your hands up! Sansa shouted, his gun along with his colleagues at the ready. Snipe's eyes swept the scene before them. There were 9 people, 2 in uniform, on their knees in front of them. A few of them were bleeding from bullet wounds to their legs or other parts of their bodies. But the main focus was on 3 specific individuals. 2 were men who were lying sprawled on the ground, bleeding liberally from bullet wounds. 1 was still alive, barely breathing, while the other was dead, a bullet shot in between the eyes. The third subject, however, was the one who caught Snipe's attention the most. It was a teenager, wearing a black gakurin with red high-top sneakers, had curly forest green hair with black highlights. And most concernedly, holding a gun that was still lightly smoking. You with the gun, put down your weapon, and kick it towards us. Officer Sansa shouted as all the guns, including Snipe's, were trained on the teen. Snipe had expected some resistance, on the momentary thought that the teen was on the villain's side. But the teen did as he was instructed, kicking the gun towards the police while keeping his hands up. Sansa then ordered the teen handcuffed, but to Snipe's surprise, the other hostages who were being tended to by the heroes suddenly leapt to the teen's defense, claiming that the teen was actually their savior through the crisis. In the end, Sansa recalled the cuffs but ordered one of his men to stay close to the teen. After collecting his belongings, the teen was escorted to a waiting police cruiser outside of the range. That was when Snipe would make the decision that would change not only his life, but for the teen as well. Officer Sansa. He approached the cat-headed police officer. Yeah, the kid Tabi questioned, right? As standard protocol, Snipe-san, Sansa nodded. But why do you ask? I want to be part of the questioning, Snipe said, or at the very least observe it. Sansa gave him a questioning look. And why are you requesting such a move? I'm calling it an intervention, if I may, Snipe replied. Were you involved with the slime villain case last Friday? Not directly, but I heard about it. The kid was the same one who shot the villain in the eyes to save his fellow. I spoke with Principal Nezu about him, and it was clear that the kid, who despite being quirkless, is able to handle a gun with arguable skill, is a potential recipe for disaster. We haven't been hearing much about gun-related crimes these days, but this kid has the potential to cause untold horror should we not treat his situation carefully. Sansa carefully considered the pro-hero's reasoning. While I cannot authorize any involvement with the suspect without clearance from my superior, I can allow you to observe the questioning. Thank you, Officer Sansa, Snipe nodded. Is it okay if Principal Nezu comes to observe too? That shouldn't be a problem, Snipe-san. Do you need a ride back to the station? Yes, please. Midoria drummed his fingers against the table, scanning the blank, empty walls and the lone fluorescent light glowing above as he waited in the interrogation room, handcuffed to the hard, metal bench he was sitting on, alongside the quirk-suppressant cuffs an officer slapped onto his wrists the moment they sat him down. He knew it was protocol, but he inwardly scoffed. If anyone at the precinct knew about him from research or maybe even watching the news, they would know that it would be pointless putting the quirk-suppressant cuffs on him. Then again, they were likely so used to doing it that they probably didn't care about this case. Midoria sighed. Cuffs or not, whatever happened next would determine where he would end up. Either way, the outcomes were grim. Best case, he is released with a warning and returned to Inko, who will lock him in his room and never let him see the light of day again. Slightly worse case, he gets sentenced to juvenile hall where delinquents would most likely take advantage of him. Or absolutely worst case, he is sentenced as an adult and sent to prison, where even more untold horrors awaited him as a quirkless teen against many criminals with dangerous quirks. But, while the chilling possibilities threatened to freeze his blood, Midoriya didn't regret what he did back at the range in hindsight. He may have taken a villain's life, but in his perception, that was a lot better than having 10 civilian casualties if he hadn't stepped in. Of course, whether his conscience would be able to weather his coming fate was another question altogether. The door opened, interrupting Midoriya's brooding. A tall, somewhat average-looking man entered the room, in his arm a notepad, a pen, and an empty file. Midoriya eyed the man with seeming emptiness as he placed the items he brought with him in onto the table, and sat down on the opposite chair. My name is Detective Tsukachi, the man began, and I'll be in charge of this questioning today. My quirk is called Lie Detector, which means I will know if you are speaking the truth or telling a lie. Tsukachi opened the notepad. Let's start off with your name. Midoriya Izuku. Truth. Your age? 15. Truth. And what is your quirk? I am quirkless. But Tsukachi raised an eyebrow. My quirk registered that as a lie. Care to try again? Midoriya scowled. Yeah, I'm sure you never consider an inactive quirk factor as a possibility. Might want to recalibrate your mindset while you're at it. The detective frowned, not liking the sarcastic remark shot back at him. Nonetheless, he continued writing in his notepad, choosing to ignore the teen and continue with the interrogation. Do you know why we brought you in? Simple, I killed a villain. In self-defense I might add. But I suppose that doesn't matter in the eyes of the law anyway. Here, irritation melted into concern. Why do you say that? Midoriya regarded Tsukachi blankly. Even in self-defense, I killed a man. Plus, I used a gun illegally, even if it was to save the people in the range. That is already homicide and illegal firearms use charges against me. If you want to be extra cruel, you could include a charge of violating vigilante laws, even though I am quirkless. Either way, the outcome doesn't look good for me. And look, Detective Tsukachi, you're a busy man, so you probably don't want to be here dealing with a quirkless teenager who will just end up dead in a matter of time anyway. So why not just make things easier for the both of us, call the courts, set me a hearing date, and just have me shipped away to be locked up where I could possibly be of some use as some prison beach to all the villains you've locked away. Truth. Tsukachi stared numbly at the teen, quite taken aback by the defeatist attitude he had taken on and from his quirk. Despite his growing worry, the detective tried to counter it. We don't just ship suspects off to prison without thorough investigation, we dash. Do you really? Midoriya interrupted, again maintaining his blank look. I'm quirkless. That already closes a lot of doors for me. Even if you were to release me, where do I go from this? But anyway, you probably don't care much about the quirkless, seeing them as a waste of time and resources. I don't blame you for really just wanting to wash your hands of this case and sending me to prison. After all, it won't matter one bit for you and everyone else, doesn't it? Truth. The teen was clearly putting words in his mouth, but Tsukachi could feel his emotions slipping from the sudden plummet in the atmosphere in the room. As the air seemed to crush his lungs, the detective excused himself from the room in an attempt to recalibrate himself. Leaning against the wall, Tsukachi almost didn't hear Officer Sansa approach him with concern. Is what the suspect said all true? The detective had a stricken look in his eyes. My quirk didn't register a single lie in his entire speech. Midoria-kun absolutely believes that he will be sentenced to prison for what he did to be used as a beach by villains. And while the charges he brought up do make sense, I don't see them actually happening. But he is so convinced that we won't treat him fairly because he is essentially quirkless and says that we'll just lock him away just to sweep everything under the rug and be done with it. He needs help, urgently. Sansa nodded. Do I have your permission to bring them in? Yes, please. Sansa left, and Tsukachi returned to the interrogation room. He sat down and tried to give the teen an understanding look, one that was not returned as Midoria just stared off into the distance, gaze empty to the point of dejection. Listen, Midoriya-kun. Let me reassure you that we will be treating this case fairly. And for the matter, I am not quirkist. I treat everyone, quirked or not, with the basic respect they deserve to have as a human being. I cannot fully say I understand what must have been a difficult life that you have lived so far, but let me at least reassure you that we can work out a solution here. The teen continued staring resignedly off to the side. Then came a knock on the door. As it is, we have brought in someone who would like to speak to you. Tsukachi got up to answer the door. A bit of attention came back to Midoriya's eyes when into the room stepped Snipe and a certain mouse. Dog? Bear. Principal of Yui. Wah. Good morning. Nezu chirped. You must be Midoriya Izuku, I presume? It's certainly a pleasure to meet you in person. Principal Nezu. That's me. Nezu smiled as he was lifted up onto the table with Snipe's help. And I'm sure you know our masked cowboy hero, Snipe. Midoriya silently nodded. You are quite the interesting character, Midoriya-kun, Nezu continued. You are quirkless, yet you rise to a level of power much higher than a great number of heroes I have known throughout my life. What do you mean? You are quite adept at the use of a firearm. I've seen the news story about how you shot a villain's eyes to save your friend, and just now, I was updated by Snipe-san that you managed to take down 2 gun-toting villains, even killing one with a shot right in between his eyes. Quite impressive, I must say. Midoriya eyed Tsukachi, who was just standing off to the side, face neutral and silent. He turned back to Nezu. It doesn't hide the fact that I have taken a life, or the fact I used a firearm illegally. True, if we are looking from a legal standpoint, Nezu shrugged, but we must not forget the bigger picture here. You were the direct opposite of those villains. You had no intention to murder or cause hurt for the fun of it. All you cared about was saving those hostages in the shooting range when the odds were stacked against them. If that doesn't count as heroism, I will shave off all of my fur. Midoriya was silent, but his heart screamed. That was the first anyone, had told him his actions, anything, were heroic. As much as he wanted to burst into happy tears, his mind pulled him back into logic. Now wasn't the time to break down, he had to remain stable here. His fate had yet to be decided, so it wasn't time to appear vulnerable. So, what's going to happen now? And why are you and Snipe-san actually here for, Principal Nezu? Quite perceptive, aren't you? The hybrid nodded approvingly. Well, we are here to discuss the terms of your probation, of course. Probation? That's right. For even though your intentions and actions are heroic, you still technically broke the law. So short of just sending you away to prison to rot, I'd figured we can work something out so that not only the law is upheld, but your future as a hero is still both maintained and cultivated. Am I right, Detective Tsukachi? All eyes turned to the detective. While his opinion had not been sought after or consulted, Tsukachi had to agree with the principal here. Personally, he'd rather not see a young man like Midoriya have his future ruined by something as unyielding as the law. Despite being quirkless, Tsukachi was on the same wavelength as the principal on the belief that Midoriya had a promising future with the right guidance and training. While not on the same level as many of the villain cases he had tackled, Tsukachi has also dealt with cases involving quirkless individuals, and he for sure, swear on life, does not want Midoriya to fall through the cracks. Tsukachi nodded. I'm on the same boat as you, Principal Nezu. We can work something that satisfies all parties involved. Nezu beamed. Excellent. Now, I have a proposition for everyone. Midoriya-kun will be placed on probation under Yui's jurisdiction. He will be required to undergo thorough firearms training with Snipe-san here, and study up on the laws and regulations of firearms in Japan, whereupon he will be tested and required to get at least an 80% pass. He will stay in accommodations provided by Yui, and he will require a pro-hero to escort him wherever he goes. Any violation of these terms, or if he commits any crime without a good reason, will warrant an immediate sentence however the justice system deems fit. How does that sound? This was primarily directed towards Tsukachi, who responded, that is all fine and all, but what about Midoriya-kun's education? He is a middle school student, after all. Was. All eyes turned to Midoriya. Was. I was a middle school student, but I withdrew from my old school. Oh, I sense a story here, Nezu grinned. Care to tell us about it, Midoriya-kun? Tsukachi sat back down and readied his pen over the notepad. That friend I saved from the slime villain? He is no friend of mine, Midoriya explained, his tone growing caustic. Once the ball started rolling, it didn't stop. His name is Bakugo Katsuki, and his quirk allows him to create explosions from his hands. He is arrogant, abrasive, and quirkist. He bullied me relentlessly for being quirkless, turned the entire school, students and teachers, against me. And, ironically, just before his very life was threatened by the slime villain, he told me to jump off the school roof if I wanted a quirk so badly in my next life. The temperature in the room plummeted. Tsukachi was aghast at what he heard. Nezu's smile faded away into an unreadable expression, and Snipe began trembling under his mask. Did you know, when I actually went to save the BSTRD from the slime villain, he actually resisted against my efforts? He actually wanted to endanger his own life than be saved by someone who he sees as inferior. It was only the convenient arrival of All Might that ensured no one died that evening. When I went home, Bakugo stalked me, but I managed to hide out until Monday, when I inevitably had to face him in school. He accosted me in class, and when I spoke back to him, he got so triggered he attempted to maim me with his explosions. I fought back using my desk. When the homeroom teacher came running in, the entire class scapegoated me as the instigator. I was sent to the principal's office, who is also quirkist, by the way. I would have been expelled if I hadn't played to his hands, taking advantage of his quirkist attitude to withdraw myself from the school. He washed his piggy hands of me, and I got out without having a black mark on my record. A win for both of us. Tsukachi found his voice after several moments of silence. Midoriya-kun, if I remember correctly, a parent's consent and signature are required to legally withdraw a student from a school. Midoriya shrugged. It didn't matter to that pig of a man. He just wanted to get rid of me, regardless of the fact that I could forge Inko's signature on the withdrawal form. Inko? Snipe asked. That's my mother. Why do you call her by her first name? Asked a confused Nezu. She doesn't deserve to be called my mother. The caustic tone was back in Midoriya's voice. She is so overprotective of me I think it borders on helicopter parenting at best, and emotional abuse at worst. She treats me like some fragile glass sculpture, like just stepping out of the house is enough to warrant my death. It doesn't help that I am quirkless. And you know what? I had the theory that if I was released with a warning, Inko would lock me in my room and never let me see the light of day, all for the sake of my safety. It was an accusation that struck the three adults deep once again. Tsukachi had stopped writing, staring at Midoriya in disbelief. Snipe mirrored the detective, though it was hidden behind his mask. Nezu's unreadable expression had turned calculative with deep thought. The silence that followed was thick with tension. Midoriya certainly felt lighter after spilling his life story out into the open, but that brought him no closer to his fate. It was Snipe who would break the silence. Detective Tsukachi, was that all true? Tsukachi slowly turned to the masked cowboy. My quirk didn't register a single lie. Nezu hummed. This is very concerning, and all the more reason why Midoriya-kun should be placed under Yui's protection. While we don't have physical proof to present to the courts in a custody battle, It is imperative we minimize Inko's interaction with Midoriya-kun from henceforth. Tsukachi nodded. We will still have to contact her about what happened, but I think the law will override whatever objections she might have. As detective and principal began discussing, Midoriya sat completely silent. He didn't register Snipe coming up next to him. "You okay, kid?" Slowly, the teen turned towards the masked cowboy. "It's a surreal feeling to have others vouch for you." Snipe stayed silent, as Midoriya continued, "I've only experienced it once when I was apprehended at the shooting range. The other patrons came to my defense, and for the first time, I had support, when no one wanted anything to do with the quirkless piece of trash. Though, they didn't know I was quirkless, but I wasn't going to tell them that, and spoil the one good thing that has happened to me so far." The teen says no more after that, beyond a soft sigh. Snipe sat down on the bench, and slid next to Midoriya. The hero wrapped a hand across the teen's shoulder, causing the former to flinch from the contact. But he slowly relaxed when Snipe's hand gently squeezed his shoulder, massaging with a dexterous touch. Midoriya fortuitously leaned in slightly into the hero's aura. "This won't be the last time you will have support," Snipe said. "There will never be a last time. Let me assure you of that. We will be your pillars." Midoriya fought hard against the tears that threatened to spill over his eyes. Nonetheless, he felt light. For the first time in his life, the dying embers of hope had begun to rekindle. Perhaps, he thought, things could start becoming better. "Sorry to keep you waiting, Midoriya-kun." Nezu's voice brought him back to attention. "Detective Tsukachi and I have come to an agreement over your probation terms. Everything we've talked about will be implemented, and as for your education, well, there is nothing in the UE clauses to say that the principal can't take on a student for themselves. So Midoriya Izuku, I say to you, welcome to UE as an unofficial student. This is your hero academia." This time, there was no stopping the tears from falling. But Midoriya did not break down into hysterics. Instead, he nodded resolutely. "I'll be in your care. And I promise I'll not let anyone down." Underneath his mask, Snipe smiled. "To be continued. Izuku." Midoriya doesn't stop in his packing, yes? Inko stood by the doorway, wringing her hands nervously. "I'm worried for you." "About what?" The teen didn't even turn to his mother, going back to his wardrobe and pulling out more clothes to pack into his luggage. "You got involved in 2 villain attacks, and you killed someone with a dangerous weapon. Do you know how terrified I was when I got the call from the police saying that you had been taken into custody? What happened if you were charged with a crime?" Midoriya shut his luggage closed and scrambled the combination lock. "But I wasn't. I only got probation under Yui's jurisdiction. There is no avoiding it, unless you want to see me in prison. So if you would move aside." He got up, dragging his luggage behind him. "My ride to Yui should be here by now." The teen pushed past his mother without another word, and left the apartment, closing the door behind him with a firm click. Inko was left all alone, still wringing her hands together, wondering what went wrong as she stared at the closed door bitterly. The car ride to Yui was unremarkable. As the chartered car stopped at the gates, the chauffeur opened the door to let Midoriya out and to help him take out his luggage from the boot. Nezu and Snipe were already waiting at the gates. "Good morning to you, Midoriya-kun," said Nezu. "I trust that you had no trouble getting here?" "You could say that," the teen nodded. "Excellent. Now we shouldn't dilly-dally. We have a full day planned out for you today. So come along." Seeing the twin glass buildings that were Yui Academy coming closer towards them as they approached was a moment for Midoriya to remember. At one point in his life, he would have given anything to become a student at the most prestigious hero school in the country. And although he wasn't an official student on paper, he was already one practically. It excited him, making his heart pump faster underneath his neutral mask. The corridors were empty, as homeroom had started for all the students. Occasionally, Midoriya would hear noise behind the closed doors of the classroom, but Class 1A was strangely silent as they passed. It was a question that was immediately put into the back burner. He'd ask it when the right opportunity presented itself. The first stop on the journey was Nezu's office. Midoriya was guided to a plush leather sofa. Snipe sat down next to the teen, while Nezu went to sit at the opposite sofa across a coffee table with a hot water dispenser and a small wooden box. Can I interest you in some tea, Midoriya-kun? Please. The tea was made, and Nezu offered the cup to Midoriya. Taking a sip, the teen guessed it was black tea. So how is Yui so far? Asked the hybrid principal. It's amazing, Midoriya set his cup down. It's one thing to dream of coming here, and another thing entirely to actually be here. I can understand that, Midoriya-kun. Nezu nodded with a genial smile. So while we're at it, I think we should go through the itinerary of your probation. For today, we will go through the logistics as well as gauge your academic competencies. This will be held in the morning. In the afternoon, you will undergo a firearms assessment with Snipe at his family's range. From then on, you will receive academic lessons with me in the mornings and firearms training with Snipe. Does that sound acceptable with you? I accept it unconditionally. The teen gave his assent, taking another sip of his tea. Excellent. Nezu beamed. Now, I understand that you've only just arrived here, Midoriya-kun, but I would love for you to sit through an assessment test of my creation at the earliest convenience. That way I have more time to properly gauge your competency. Midoriya remained impassive while Snipe seemed to be having a mini freakout behind his mask. I'm willing to start right now, Principal Nezu. But may I have more tea on the side? It's quite good, I have to say. Of course. Anything to make you feel comfortable. Nezu agreed immediately. I personally quite like this brand myself, though it is a little on the pricey side. Still, I believe it's worth it. The hybrid hopped off the sofa and gestured for Midoriya to follow him. Addling over to a cabinet, Nezu pulled out a noticeably thick packet of paper and carried it over to his desk. He then passed the teen a pen. You have 3 hours to answer as many of the questions you are able to. We'll leave you alone so as to not distract you, and Snipe-san will return to pick up your packet when the time is up and to bring you to lunch. I understand, Principal Nezu. Great. Then we'll take our leave now. I look forward to reviewing your answers. With a wave of his paw, Nezu guided an inconspicuously sweating Snipe out of the office. Once the door was closed, the hybrid turned to the masked cowboy. Is there something you wanted to say, Snipe-san? Snipe made no hesitation. Principal, what in tarnation are ya thinkin'? Ya given Midoriya the test that sent most of my class to tears at the end of our final year. Are ya plannin' on killin' the kid? Nezu patted his arm. Relax, my friend. I'm not that sadistic. I purposely adapted the questions to suit the average middle schooler. Though, if we were to follow my gut instinct, I have a strong feeling that Midoriya-kun is way above the average teen his age. Anyway, don't you have quirk physics with Class 1B right now? Snipe indeed had a class to teach in the coming minutes, so he made his excuses and speed-walked to the staff room to grab his lesson materials and get to class on time. As he did so, he wondered if what Nezu said was true and Midoriya had some surprises under his belt. As it turned out, he was right. It was nearing 12 noon, it was almost time for lunch, as well as the time for Midoriya to finish his written assessment. Snipe had released his class a little early to give himself time to head back to Nezu's office to pick up Midoriya and escort him to the cafeteria. He knocked on the door. Kid? Are you done? It's me, Snipe. Snipe opened the door and immediately noticed Midoriya sitting on the sofa, engrossed in the book he was currently reading. Kid! The teen snapped to attention. Oh, Snipe-san. Sorry, I didn't hear you come in. I'm here to take you to lunch. What are you reading? It's one of Principal Nezu's books. I finished the test early, and I grew bored after a while. Midoriya then looked off to the side. I hope he doesn't mind. It took a moment for Snipe to find his tongue. Kid, how long did you take to finish the test? An hour and a half? Maybe an hour and 45 minutes at the most if I include time used to check my answers. Snipe lost the ability to speak. Snipe-san. Let's go to lunch, kid. Question marks popping over his head, Midoriya went to put back the book from where he had taken it and followed Snipe out of the office. They had only just started walking when Midoriya asked the question that was brewing in his mind. Snipe-san, why did you seem so stunned when I told you how long I took to finish the test? Kid, you must know that the test is Principal Nezu's infamous torture test. He gives it to all third-year students as part of their final exams. The reason it's called this torture test is because it is so damn difficult that it is not surprising if half the class fails it at the first attempt. There are many who weren't able to finish the test within the 3-hour time limit. And as for me, I barely passed it on my first attempt, just managed to put the pen down right as time was up. Oh, did I see? But it didn't seem that difficult to me, Snipe-san. Once again, the cowboy hero was stunned. Kidda would ask if you had a secret intelligence-boosting quirk, but I know that ain't true. Well, Midoria shrugged. When you grew up with no friends distracting you, studying and analysis take the priority and allow for intellectual expansion. Snipe nodded, just as they reached the cafeteria doors. This is the cafeteria, kid. You'd love the food prepared here. Lunch Rush is the chef after all. Lunch Rush? You mean the cook hero that once prepared a full 6-course French meal for over 10,000 typhoon refugees over an hour 7 years ago? Asked Midoria. Hit the bullseye there, kid. Teacher and student entered the cafeteria. It was completely packed with students across all 3 years and education courses. Loud, commingled chatter echoed and reverberated across the walls, and there was a long queue of students snaking towards the counter. At this rate I think I can forget about eating lunch, Midoria remarked as he stared at the queue. Don't worry about it, kid. Until you become an official student of UE, you're gonna be taking the teacher's queue. Oh, thank heavens. The teacher's queue was, naturally, empty when Snipe and Midoria entered the line. The students queuing up next to them stared at Midoria in particular, an outlier among the signature gray blazers, dark green bottoms and red ties, queuing up alongside a teacher in a line they were not supposed to be in. Conversation quietly shifted towards this unknown green-haired teenager as he ordered katsudon off from the automated menu while Snipe ordered a Western set lunch. Midoria paid no attention to the attention he was getting, more focused on how Snipe was going to eat with his gas mask on. He knew that people would often have a very good reason to wear a mask. Snipe must have a reason for wearing one, or perhaps just for the aesthetic, but what are special occasions that he took it off? Midoriya's instinct was not in a crowded place like the cafeteria, which would also explain why they were taking out their lunches instead of eating it directly inside the cafeteria. Once their food was ready, hero and student took their respective bags and departed from the kitchen, the latter again ignoring the eyes and whispers aimed at him. They cut through the corridors to the staff room, loud voices and laughter echoing from behind the closed door. The teachers seemed to be quite the lively bunch, Midoria remarked at the noise. Not everyone, just a few. But they make enough noise for all of us, Snipe corrected, sliding the door open. Midoriya's former hero fanboy would have lost himself at the recognizable faces he saw. There was present Mike and Midnight getting into some energized discourse and the main source of the noise. Cementos, Vlad King, Ectoplasm, Power Loader and Hound Dog were sitting around watching the fracas, and someone was holed up in a yellow sleeping bag with a tuft of black hair peeking out of the hole off to the side. Unlike his previous incarnation, Midoriya merely held his neutral, deadpan expression, even when attention was directed in their direction. Oh Snipe, there you a dash. Present Mike did a double take, as did everyone else, save for the person in the sleeping bag. Who's the little listener you've got there? This is Midoriya Izuku, Principal Nezu's student, Snipe replied. He's the one serving his probation under Yui's jurisdiction. It's a pleasure to make your acquaintance, everyone, Midoriya bowed. Midnight stalked over, a noticeable swing in her curvy hips. The teen remained deadpan as the flirtatious R18 heroine leaned down and seemed to scrutinize his face. Even when her thoughtful expression morphed into one of sultriness, Midoriya did not visibly react, though Snipe could see the annoyance growing in his irises. A little on the scrawny and short side, Midnight remarked, liking her lips, but still, quite the cutie if I should say so myself. A tick mark appeared over Midoriya's head. Please remove yourself from my personal space, Midnight-san. I do not appreciate being eyed like a piece of meat, bearing in mind that I am still a minor. The heroine drew her head back, smirking. Might aren't you a feisty one? More tick marks began popping all over Midoriya's head, so Snipe intervened before things could turn ugly. I would appreciate it if you left my mentee alone. Yatoan, a fine line from SXL harassment, Kayama. Midnight lost her smirk for a moment, before it returned, "Very well, I'll leave you alone for now. I do hope we get to talk again, little cutie." As she stalked back to the teacher's congregation, Snipe quietly led an irritable Midoria over to his cubicle. He cleared his desk and pulled out a foldable chair for Midoria to sit down. "I'm sorry about Midnight, kid. She does that to pretty much everyone younger than her. How is she a teacher in a school full of hormonal teenagers, then?" "I really don't know, kid." Midoriya sighed, muttered "Itadakimasu," before digging into his food. Then the teen paused mid-chew. "Snipe-san, you do take your mask off when you eat, right?" "Of course, kid. How else will I be able to eat? I've never seen you without your mask on. Do you wear it for a specific reason?" Here, Snipe glanced a little off to the side. "Multiple, actually. I'll wear it as part of my hero outfit and fair practical purposes, like if there is a gas leak or something, but I'll also have a personal reason for wearing it." "I see," Midoriya nodded. "Do you want me to face away from you?" The masked cowboy thought about it for a moment, before shaking his head. "Nah, it's fine. Ya my mentee and I trust ya." "Are you sure? Because I'm pretty certain the other teachers haven't seen you without your mask either." "I'm certain, kid. There will be no secrets between us." Snipe took off his Stetson hat and placed it on his desk. Ruffling his dreadlocks, he reached around to the back of his head, undid a clasp, and pulled the gas mask off of his face with a soft sigh. Midoriya had to admit, Snipe was a really handsome man. The cowboy had tan skin, a square jawline framed by a rugged mustache that morphed into a short beard, and sparkling icy blue eyes. Though perhaps the most defining feature was the jagged scar that ran diagonally from just above his left eyebrow, down across the bridge of his nose, and ending at his right cheek. It was a few shades lighter than the rest of his skin, and it appeared to be years old. The teen asked quietly, "Is the scar the personal reason?" "It is, kid," Snipe nodded. "I know there should be nothing to be ashamed about scars, but it didn't matter where I was in the States or Japan, people were always staring at my scar. I had it since I was very young, when one of the cattle at my family's ranch got spooked and attacked me. I grew very self-conscious as a result, so my grandpa made the mask for me." Midoriya pursed his lips. "I don't know if it means anything now, but in my opinion, the scar makes you look really badass and rugged." A blush appeared over Snipe's cheeks. "Ah shucks, kid. You're making me embarrassed." Midoriya allowed a tiny smile. "Just take it. You deserve to be praised." Steam began pouring out of the cowboy's ears, and he buried his face in his hands. "No, stop. You're gonna make me combust." Meanwhile, over at the teacher's congregation, Cementos turned in the direction towards the hidden pair. "Anyone want to guess why I am getting an extremely adorable vibe coming from Snipe?" Present Mike paused in his incessant disturbing of midnight. "My guess is that the little listener said something that made our resident Ihal boy extremely flustered." "How cute," Power Loader remarked. Back over with Snipe, he slapped his cheeks rapidly to will the blush off from his face. "All right, that's enough. We need to eat, otherwise we won't have time for your trainin' later." The cowboy ended the conversation by hastily attacking his boxed lunch. To the side, Midoriya's tiny smile grew just a bit wider. After lunch was done, and Snipe put his mask and hat back on, he and Midoriya departed from the staff room, bidding the other teachers farewell. Midnight gave Midoriya a wink. They left the campus behind them for the subway station, hopping onto their ride into an area of Tokyo just outside of the downtown core. A short walk away stood Snipe's family-owned shooting range, a two-story building nestled snugly in a midst of other commercial/residential lots, aptly named Wild West Firearms. This led Midoriya to ask the question, "Are your family with you here in Japan?" "Not at the moment," Snipe replied. "They do stop by every now and then, but currently they are all in the States." "So who's running the range?" asked Midoriya. "A couple of friends of mine." They reached the front door. Snipe opened it and let Midoriya enter first. The first floor was a large gun dealership. The walls were lined with shelves filled with add-ons for weapons, which were occasionally separated by long-range firearms propped up by metal hooks. There were glass cases filled with a variety of items such as cleaning kits, smaller firearms and ammunition, racks and mannequins displaying the latest in tactical armor, clothes and accessories, and shelves loaded with the newest publications on firearms. The retail floor was helmed by two gas-masked individuals who waved to Snipe as the hero led Midoria towards a set of glass doors at the other end of the room. Then a ride up to the second floor via elevator. Stepping out, they approached a reception desk adjacent to a set of frosted glass doors. Again, a gas-masked individual manned the desk. He looked up from the computer screen. "Yo, Colt. I didn't expect to see ya here today. What's the occasion?" "Afternoon, Huck," Snipe nodded. "I am here on business today. Trainin' my charge here on proper firearms usage." "Wonderful. Glad to see a new face here on the range." "It's a pleasure to make your acquaintance too, Huck-san," Midoria bowed, before being led away by Snipe. The teen turned to the hero. "Is Colt your actual name or some kind of nickname?" "It's my actual name, kid," Snipe replied. Midoria raised an eyebrow. "Is there a reason why you go by your hero name then?" "A few, mainly because I get unwanted attention fair having a non-Japanese first name. And Snipe describes me better. Most people think of a young horse when given the name Colt." "I thought Colt is also a brand of firearms?" "Smart kid. But firearms are very uncommon in Japan, so not many people are even aware of the brand." "I see." The range didn't appear that much different from the one Midoria visited in Yokohama, though perhaps it was more well-maintained since it was a registered and licensed range. But instead of stopping, Snipe guided Midoria into a small room off to the side which appeared to be a classroom, with half a dozen desks facing a whiteboard at one end. "We're gonna start with the basic firearms laws and the proper safety procedures in handlin' the bad boys. Go grab a seat and we'll begin." "Yes, Snipe-sensei." Midoria sat down in the front row, and Snipe picked up a marker and began writing down the numerous laws and policies regarding firearms usage, possession, and retail in Japan. Snipe did his best to present the laws in comprehensible terms without the complicated legalese, but when he turned around to check on his mentee's progress, the new notebook the teen had pulled out was already 1/3 filled with detailed notes and questions branching out from each line a law was written on. Snipe whistled. "Geez, kid, I'd say that you had an analysis quirk, but then you'd call me stupid fair as skin the second time. Again, you can blame the lack of friends, Snipe-sensei." In that case, I don't have to worry about being too slow. Think you can keep up?" "Try me, Snipe-sensei." Eventually, what was supposed to be a 2.5-hour theory lesson was boiled down to just under an hour. Snipe was genuinely impressed by how fast Midoria could write, filling up one notebook and pulling out a second and third in quick succession. Discussions over questions and personal commentary were done in between writing episodes, but ultimately became an important part of the pool of knowledge that Midoria was amassing and absorbing. Then came the practical lesson, where action was to happen. Snipe led Midoria into the range proper. It had 10 lanes, segregated by booths at the front end. The cowboy brought his charge to a booth in the middle. "First thing you gotta do is put on a headset that fits snugly to protect your ears. I did some research about that range I first saw ya at, and they didn't have a protective room fair spectators ta watch others shootin' without possibly permanently damagin' their eardrums from prolonged exposure. That should have been enough fair them ta be shut down. Here, we enforce strict regulations enacted by law to protect our shooters." Midoria nodded, and began trying out the different headsets available while Snipe went to get the firearms he wanted the teen to test for his first lesson, alongside all of the ammunition and magazines required for the right shot. After 3 tries, he finally settled on a headset, just as Snipe returned with a trolley loaded with all the items he had gathered. "Alrighty, here's the first one. This here is a Glock 19 handgun." Snipe pulled out said firearm. "It's one of the most commonly used firearm by law enforcement around the world. It's also a good starting gun for beginners, since the recoil is very controlled." He handed the gun over to Midoria. "Now, remember what we covered in safety protocol? Always check to make sure if the gun is loaded." Midoria replied almost robotically. "Check that the safety clip is on, make sure the gun is pointed at no one, always towards the floor or the target, and keep all fingers away from the trigger until ready to fire. Good kid. Snipe then produced a magazine. I want you to load up the gun and aim at the target directly in front of ya. Remember the basic posture we talked about? Yes, Snipe-sensei. Midoria got into position, back straight, feet shoulder-width apart, one leg slightly in front of the other. He raised the gun, keeping his arms bent slightly, grip tight on the handle. Ready when ya are, kid. Remember to maintain a 2-second gap in between each bullet. The teen took a steadying breath and pulled the trigger. The blam of the bullet being fired was muffled by the headset, but Midoria had to physically steel himself from jumping at the gun bounced back against his palms through the recoil. This may not have been the first time he fired a gun, but this was the first time he was consciously doing so. The previous two experiences were in the heat of the moment, when adrenaline was pumping, so his mind hadn't really registered the recoil when he pulled the trigger. This time was different, and it affected his aim somewhat, as seen when he finished the first 5 shots and the target automatically came towards them at the booth to show the results. 2 of the bullets had missed the target completely, while the other 3 hit, 2 of which were outside of the bullseye red circle in the middle of the target's chest, and the last one just within the borders of the red circle. If Midoria was disappointed he didn't show it, I guess my first 2 times hitting a target in real life were just lucky shots. You still did a better job than many of the trainees I've seen in running the range. That may be true, but my goal is to get all shots within the target. If guns are going to be my only defense against attack, I cannot afford to miss any shot that could potentially save my life. This is only your first time under supervision, kid, Snipe reminded. Your road to becoming a marksman is still a long on ahead. But I'll firmly believe you will get there through constant practice. Am I ever so glad for that, Midoria agreed. Over the course of 3 hours, Midoria went through a series of handguns from the same brand, with varying degrees of success at hitting the target. It was ultimately an experience for the teen, despite the controlled environment he was in, the feeling of exhilaration and power from executing a weapon that could cause as much damage as the most powerful of quirks firing through his nerves and making his heart pump wildly. Overall, it was a very fulfilling day. Snipe and Midoria returned to Yui just in time to grab dinner from the cafeteria before their scheduled evening meeting with Nezu. The hybrid principal was patiently waiting in his office when the masked cowboy and his mentee entered. Snipe-san, Midoriya-kun, how was your afternoon? Productive, the teen replied. We've established a good foundational base for the kid to continue building up, Snipe added. Excellent. Nezu beamed, and speaking of a good foundation, I spent my afternoon checking your test answers. And color me amazed, Midoriya-kun. By far in my entire tenure as principal of Yui, I have never encountered such high marks in any of my tests. You have broken the highest record by scoring a whopping 95% on today's test. Snipe barely stopped himself from falling off the sofa, slowly turning to Midoria. Kid, I'm just gonna ask it. Whether you see me as an idiot, but are you sure you don't have an intelligence-boosting quirk? And I will reply in all honesty, I do not, Midoria deadpanned. The principal was ecstatic. I am going to be honest with you, Midoriya-kun. If it weren't for the fact that it would disrupt the current logistical system, I would have enrolled you in our first-year heroics course right away. But that aside, this allows me to adjust our lesson curriculum too. Cover the first-year module without worry of overstepping what you are capable of. I promise to do my absolute best, Principal Nezu, Midoriya nodded. And I'm confident that you will, Midoriya-kun. Nezu smiled. However, now isn't the time to begin our academic lessons. The day has come to an end, and it is time for us to unwind and relax ourselves. Snipe-san will show you to your room, and he'll come to pick you up at 7:30 in the morning for breakfast. Your first lesson with me will start at 8. Does that sound reasonable with you? Absolutely, Principal Nezu. Splendid, the hybrid clapped his paws together. Then I won't hold you back any longer, Midoriya-kun. Oh, and before you go, here's your key card to your room. He slid a card across the coffee table. I hope you have no trouble settling in, and have a good evening. Thank you, Principal Nezu. Have a good evening yourself. Midoriya took the card and followed Snipe out of Nezu's office. It was a quiet walk to the elevator and the ride down a few floors. "How did Yui manage to accommodate me?" asked the teen. "Principal Nezu converted Hound Dog's old office into your room," Snipe replied. "Ah, we're here." They arrived at a door that was marked private. Midoria fished out the key card and tapped it against the automated reader. With a ping, the door was unlocked and opened. Midoria went inside first and flipped the light switch on. The room was decently sized, but it was definitely bigger than his old room back home. It was also modestly furnished with a simple wood-framed bed, a plain desk and chair set, an empty bookcase, and a standard-size closet, where his luggage was placed against. However, on second glance, Midoria also noticed a laptop on the desk, and mounted on the wall opposite the bed was a flat-screen plasma television with the remote sitting on the bed itself. Across the room, there was a second wood panel door. "Is this all for me?" "Yep," Snipe nodded. Midoria regarded his mentor blankly. "This is too much?" "Well, you haven't seen the bathroom yet." "Pardon?" Snipe guided Midoria towards the second door and opened it. Flipping the light switch on, Midoriya's already widened eyes grew a little bigger. The bathroom, like the bedroom before it, was also modestly furnished, consisting of a bathtub shower combo, a sink with a cabinet underneath, a plain mirror, and a marble toilet bowl. Two floral-esque light fixtures stood proud on both sides of the mirror, and a plastic rack with a variety of soap bottles hung inside the shower combo. "Okay, this is definitely too much." "Can't help it, kid," Snipe shrugged. "All this was principal's orders." "Kid, I don't think I need to lie down." "I understand, even I was stunned when Principal Nezu told me about what he had planned to do to your room. I'll leave you to yourself. Have a good evening, kid." "You too, Snipe-sensei." Snipe departed from the room, leaving Midoriya to his devices. He sauntered over to the bed and fell face-first onto it. The mattress is extremely soft." Midoriya sighed. For several minutes, he just laid there prone on the bed, trying to come to terms that Nezu had gone way overboard in accommodating him. Eventually peeling himself off from the bed, he figured he should do something to distract himself. "Perhaps I should unpack and get myself ready for tomorrow." Yet that sounded like a good idea. To be continued. It was 1 week into Midoriya's probation that he and Snipe encountered a budding problem. They were back in the range when the issue first made its appearance. Midoriya had gone through the entire Glock series of handguns and pistols, and had moved forward to higher caliber firearms. The thing was, with higher caliber handguns, they were heavier and had a stronger recoil. This became very apparent when Midoriya picked up the firearm, a Ruger GP 100.357 Magnum revolver. His lips thinned at the heavier weight, and when he got into shooting position, his arms trembled from the weight they were subjected to in the attempt to keep the revolver steady. And when he pulled the trigger, the recoil came on so unexpectedly Midoriya made a noise of surprise and almost dropped the revolver. He quickly set it down and shook his hands to counter the numbing pain from the gun hitting his palms hard. The final detail came when the target rushed up front, the bullet whole way off the mark. "Looks like I don't have the strength to properly hold heavier firearms," Midoriya let out a disappointed breath. "I suspected as much," Snipe nodded. "You need to build up your overall muscle to safely handle these guns." "How are we going to do that?" asked the teen. "Why don't we head back to Yui Fair the day? I'll come up with something." Snipe would take 2 days to put together a training regimen for Midoriya to follow. Now afternoons were not entirely spent at the range. For 2 hours each day, Snipe would bring his mentee to Gym Gamma on campus for an extensive workout. Covering cardio, heavyweight strength, balance and flexibility, Snipe explained that it wasn't enough just to focus on having the strength to hold heavier weapons steady and safely. While the goal of becoming an exemplary marksman was one of them, in the field of heroics, that wasn't enough. There were plenty of other factors Midoriya had to be aware of: the movement of villains, his own reflexes, dodging attacks, among others. He needed to be well-rounded in all fields to make up for his lack of a quirk that might have given him an advantage. Midoriya did not complain, despite how knackered he was after the first few days. His stamina was paltry, so the daily runs on the treadmill left him nauseous and with aching sides. His muscle strength was non-existent, leaving him struggling to complete the reps assigned by Snipe. Flexibility also evaded him at the start, his joints miming in pain after each exercise. Perhaps the only thing up to par were his reflexes, as Midoria was able to keep up in various training methods Snipe led him through, such as dodgeball, balloon kicking, and side shuffles. He could blame Bakugu for that, though. On the bright side, all of this exertion allowed him an almost guaranteed good night's sleep at the end of each day. He was so tired he was out like the light within seconds of hitting the pillow. And an added benefit? He fell asleep so fast that there wasn't enough time for those dark thoughts to invade his mind and shroud him in a veil of vengeance. They had always been there, just out of sight at the back of his mind, always unnoticed because of how busy Midoria was through the days of his probation to really deal with the darkness brewing in the recesses of his brain. Then came one particular day when the unwitting repression was suddenly released and led to an interesting development that would take the road in a completely different direction. 2 weeks in, Midoria finally had some improvement. He was able to now hold the Ruger GP 100.357 Magnum revolver steady with negligible shaking in his arms. When he pulled the trigger, the recoil was still profound, but it didn't catch him by surprise this time. Also, the bullets hit the inside of the target this time, with 4 of the 8 within the bullseye, and the other 4 within acceptable distance from the red circle. Once the last of the bullets had been fired, Midoria set the revolver and released a sigh. "Good job, kid," Snipe praised. "That was better than last time." "Gotta keep improving though," Midoria muttered. "I can't afford to miss too many shots." Snipe laid a hand on his mentee's shoulder. "Why don't you take 5? You gotta take some breaks here and there. I'll go get the next set of guns fair ya ta try. And remember not to shoot anything while I'm gone, okay?" Squeezing the teen's shoulder, Snipe went off to retrieve the firearms, leaving Midoria alone at the booth. Sighing, the teen rested his hands against the empty magazines, staring ahead at the target just within arm's length away from him. He eyed the bullet holes in the paper, dotting the chest area of the humanoid shape. If the target was a real person, they would be on their way to death by now. Just like Bakugu, when I desecrate his body with round after round of bullets until nothing remains but bloody pulp. Now, it was no secret that Midoria despised Bakugu, but even he was surprised at how dark his thoughts have become in regards to the explosive blonde. As he had been so busy with his firearms training with Snipe and lessons with Nezu, he didn't really have the time to properly acknowledge these thoughts. But now that he was on break, a moment to himself, there was nothing stopping the darkness from returning with full force as it consumed his mind. "He'll be nothing but a corpse, which I will sheet upon and pee all over. I will douse him with gas and set him on fire in front of his parents. I will spit upon his ashes and throw them into the sewer. I will blaspheme his memory, I'll destroy everything that he has. I'll kill those lackeys of his, I'll kill his parents, his grandparents and his extended family. I'll kill everyone at Arudara, the students, teachers, and that pig man, for making my life hell. I will kill everyone who wronged me. I will kill dash. Kid. Kill. Kid. Kill. Midoriya. Kill. Izuku. The darkness vanished. Midoriya looked up with a sharp gasp. Snipe had grabbed his arm, whatever expression he had concealed by his mask. Snipe.sensei? The cowboy hero was silent. What happened? Kid, I don't want you to step away from the booth. Midoriya did as he was told, still confused. And then he noticed. When Snipe had gone off to grab the next set of firearms for him to try, the only objects on the booth table were the .357 Magnum revolver. Now though, the table was overflowing with .357 revolvers to the point that many had spilled over and clattered to the floor. Midoriya's eyes widened. Did I do this? When I returned, I saw ya hunched over the table. Your hands were glowing, and revolvers were literally multiplying, by the dozen under your hands. Midoriya instinctually looked down at his palms, and then at the pile of revolvers in front of him. Could it be? Is this .my Quirk? A few moments of silence. I think we should call Principal Nezu and Recovery Girl to assess this. Sometime later, Yui's principal and nurse arrived at Wild West Firearms. When Snipe brought them up to the range, Midoria was still staring at his palms in disbelief. "Midoriya-kun," Nezu chirped, catching the teen's attention. "I just heard that your quirk may have just manifested." "I don't think so. And we are going to prove that conclusively. For that I've brought along someone whom you may recognize as the youthful heroine." Nezu raised a paw towards the elderly woman in a lab coat. "Recovery Girl," Midoriya bowed. "It's a pleasure to make your acquaintance." "And it's good to see you too, dearie," Recovery Girl smiled warmly. "It must have been a surprise to see that you were duplicating objects through your hands, as what Snipe told me when we arrived." "You could say that." "Well then." Nezu clapped his paws together. "I believe we should get the assessment underway then?" Recovery Girl pulled out a clipboard with papers attached from the bag she brought with her, and began by asking Midoriya generic questions to corroborate the information she had in the papers. Then came one of the million-dollar questions. "Can you tell me what might have caused your quirk to manifest?" Here, Midoriya became slightly nervous. Unlike the trope where the character descends into darkness and remembers nothing of it when snapped back into reality, Midoriya remembered full well his spiral into darkness when his thoughts began to wander. Now begged the question of whether to reveal what truly happened or to come up with a cover story. On the one hand, having dark thoughts of massacring people was not something Midoriya wanted to say in an environment where firearms were readily available, since it implies that he has villainous inclinations that were alarmingly real and potentially dangerous. On the other hand, he remembered something important that Snipe told him 1 week prior. "There will be no secrets between us." If Snipe was unhesitant in revealing a deeply personal secret to someone whom he had only recently met, then there was little reason for Midoriya to hide secrets himself, since, logically speaking, doing so could mean spilt blood if he wasn't careful. My thoughts began to wander into dark places. Recovery Girl raised an eyebrow. "Could you elaborate?" "When I saw the target after finishing shooting, I thought to myself that if the target was a real person, they would be dead instantly. Then, darkness clouded my mind. I could only think of massacring people, gunning them down for all the wrongs they've committed against me. I thought of shooting up my old middle school, killing everyone inside. Thought of desecrating the corpses when I was done killing them all, pissing on them, dousing them in petrol and setting them all on fire. I only snapped out of it when Snipe-sensei called out to me and grabbed my arm. And that was when I saw the multiplied copies of the revolver I was using previously on the table." The masked cowboy was stunned and rightfully terrified by his mentee's words. Nezu had a concerned expression, lips pursed in thought. Recovery Girl, if she was horrified by what she heard, hid it behind a neutral mask as she wrote all of what was said down. "How are you feeling now, Midoriya-kun?" she asked. "I feel fine, Recovery Girl," the teen replied. "Any lingering dark thoughts?" Midoriya shook his head after a moment. The Medi-heroine took a few notes. "I want to conduct an experiment, if that is okay with everyone." "What are you planning to do, Chiyo-san?" asked Snipe. "I want to see if Midoriya-kun can repeat the effects of his quirk in a controlled environment," she replied. "Midoriya-kun's quirk has a lot of potential, but it carries great danger if it can only be activated when he is going through mental instability, especially with regards to firearms." Snipe nodded. Stepping to the side, he went to grab an empty magazine from the range itinerary. He gave it to Midoriya. "Now, Midoriya-kun, I want you to try to duplicate the magazine in your hand." The teen concentrated, trying to recreate the moment where he duplicated the revolvers. A few minutes passed, but nothing happened. "I can't do it." Recovery Girl nodded and wrote a few notes. "Midoriya-kun, while I would congratulate you in unlocking your quirk, I must warn you to be very careful with it. While a few more tests will be required with strict supervision, what we've gathered today is that your quirk can easily put you into a slippery slope towards bloodshed. I am not saying that you will become a criminal or villain because of this, but we must work together to find ways for you to utilize your quirk safely and with the right mindset." Midoriya willed the strength to nod, but one look into his irises was clear that he was in an emotional quandary over his new quirk. Nezu was the first to notice. "Midoriya-kun must be exhausted. So why don't we all return to Yui? Snipe was already intending to end the day's firearms training, so he agreed quickly. Midoriya just followed the motion, too lost in his thoughts to really say anything about it. So my quirk can easily make me a villain. Midoriya stared blankly at the ceiling from his position on his bed back at Yui. I should be happy that my quirk finally came up, but is it worth it? Since I can only activate it when I am thinking of killing someone? He rolled to his side. How is Snipe-sensei dealing with this? Is he going to treat me differently now that my quirk has manifested, and the implications surrounding it? And will it be a good different or a bad different? Then came knocking at his door. Getting up from his bed, Midoriya went to check the peephole to see who it was. Speak of the devil and he will appear. He opened the door. Snipe-sensei, is something the matter? I want to talk with you for a short while. Okay, if that isn't ambiguously worrying, Midoriya thought to himself, but opened the door wider to let the masked cowboy in. So what is it that you wanted to talk about? Snipe sat down on Midoriya's bed, took off his hat and removed his mask. For the record, kid, I don't think any different about you for what you told Recovery Girl earlier. You did the right thing being honest with her. Midoriya nodded, but felt a lot lighter inside. On that note though, we need to talk about the new arrangements from Principal Nezu. And what are they? The teen sat down next to his mentor. Your afternoons will no longer be entirely spent at the range, said Snipe. For an hour and a half, you will be having sessions with Hound Dog, our school's guidance counselor. All right, when will this happen? Startin' tomorrow, Snipe confirmed. Principal Nezu stressed the importance of starting early, since the information you've given us indicate potentially dangerous risks should they not be dealt with in time. Some of the original grimness from before returned to Midoriya's mind. I understand, Snipe-sensei. Sensing the shift in his mentee's aura, Snipe wrapped an arm around the teen's shoulders and pulled him close. Hey, don't sink into the downer, kid. I never said that you were going to become a villain or anything. We're just mitigating any negative possibilities. The quirk doesn't mean the person. I know that, Midoriya nodded. I'm more worried about how to utilize my quirk without having to resort to dark thoughts just to activate it. I would experiment by myself, but I don't want for things to spiral out of control. And I trust that you wouldn't, Snipe replied, but you don't have to fret. As part of his job as guidance counselor, Hound Dog is also a licensed quirk specialist. If I may guess, he's already been given your information by Recovery Girl and is currently planning on how to safely work with your quirk to test out its full capabilities. Midoriya didn't have any objections to that, or rather, have anything to say about that, so he just nodded silently. Snipe squeezed the teen's shoulder. Yeah, a good kid, Izuku. Always remember that, okay? You're gonna be a great hero someday. I will, Snipe-sensei. With a final pat, Snipe retracted his hand, speaking as he put his mask back on. I'll leave you to do whatever you want. If anything, call Recovery Girl or Principal Nezu, okay? Midoriya nodded, and bade his mentor farewell as the cowboy departed from the room. Now on his lonesome, he wondered what he could do to keep his mind away from dark places. Perhaps a hot shower and some TV time could help. Midoriya's first session with Hound Dog took place as soon as lunch was over. Snipe escorted him to the counselor's office, as was protocol. Now, Hound Dog might appear to be quite intimidating, the cowboy revealed. There's nothing to be afraid of him. Think of him as a large dog that is actually friendly. I hope you mean metaphorically, because I believe Hound Dog-san is partially human. That's what I meant. Right after, the pair arrived at a nondescript door. Snipe knocked loudly. Come in, came a deep voice. The masked cowboy slid the door open and ushered Midoriya inside. I'll come pick you up at the end of the session. All right. Snipe tipped his hat in acknowledgement before closing the door. Midoriya turned to the other end of the office, where a large, muscular dog-like man with scruffy blonde hair and a muzzle tied around his snout sat behind a desk, typing away on a desktop computer. Midoriya quickly deduced the man to be Hound Dog, and while it was true that the man's physique and expression were intimidating at first glance, he remembered his mentor's words and pushed down the nervousness that threatened to bubble up. After a few moments, Hound Dog stopped typing, You must be Midoria Izuku, am I right? That's me, the teen bowed. It's a pleasure to make your acquaintance. Likewise, Midoriya-kun. Hound Dog gestured to a comfy-looking white sofa next to his desk. Come, have a seat. Thank you for having me. Midoriya sat down, and Hound Dog picked up a file. So from what I gathered, Midoriya-kun, your quirk manifested just yesterday, and the trigger was from dark thoughts of killing others stemming from childhood trauma. More or less, the teen confirmed. The counselor nodded, writing a few notes into the file. For clarification's sake, how long have you been having these thoughts? The first time it happened was a week ago. Hound Dog wrote that info down. Finally, how often have these thoughts manifested? Midoriya bit his lip in thought. They come when I am not doing anything that would otherwise preoccupy my mind. Hound Dog wrote a bit more, then closing the file and putting it to the side. Alright, so what I've gathered, your quirk activates on violent intrusive thoughts, which puts us in a quandary, since as a guidance counselor, I want you to be able to use your quirk to the fullest extent, but not at the cost of other people's lives. So what I've come up with is a two-pronged strategy to establish a middle ground for you to use your quirk safely. Midoriya nodded, allowing the counselor to continue. The first prong is to search for other means to activate your quirk. Right now, only dark thoughts are the trigger. But ultimately, they are still thoughts with energized emotion inside them. What I hope to achieve here is using more positive thoughts to activate your quirk. As it is, Snipe-san has been generous enough to lend us an empty Firearms magazine for this experiment. Reaching into a drawer, Hound Dog pulled out a small box. Fishing out the magazine, he gave it to Midoriya. Place your hand over it, Midoriya-kun, and I want you to actively think about something positive. I'll track the time taken for your quirk to activate. Like how I want to save people as a future pro hero? Asked the teen. That could work. Midoriya closed his eyes and began to repetitively think. I want to save others, that I want to save others, that I want to save others. For the first 2 minutes, nothing happened. Then Midoriya put more energy into his thinking. That I want to save others, that I want to save others, that I want to save others. Hound Dog made a soft noise of interest. Midoriya's hands were glowing, albeit faintly. As the minutes dragged on, a second magazine slowly grew out of the first one. It had barely come clean when Midoriya released his concentration, slumping into the sofa, breathing hard and his forehead dotted with sweat despite the air conditioner running. Ida can't go on. Good job regardless, Midoriya-kun. It took 5 minutes in this round. This shows that you can use positive thoughts to activate your quirk. It's not good enough, Midoriya countered. I won't have 5 minutes to create a gun or extra ammunition in a real-life setting. Precious seconds could determine whether I will live or die. I understand, Midoriya-kun, Hound Dog nodded, but it's only your first attempt. I'm sure the duplication will speed up with practice. Still, Midoriya wasn't convinced. Then he had a brainwave. Hound Dog said that you said about establishing a middle ground earlier. What if we did the same for my thoughts? Explain to me. Dark thoughts speed up the duplication, but we know the implications of that. Positive thoughts prevent such implications, but the duplication is too slow. How about I try activating my quirk using neutral thoughts instead? Hound Dog fell into thought. What do you have in mind? With my quirk, I will defeat villains? The counselor took a moment to consider. That might work. Why don't you give it a try? Putting one of the magazines by his side, Midoriya covered the other and concentrated. With my quirk, I will defeat villains. With my quirk, I will defeat villains. With my quirk, I will defeat villains. This time, it took only a few seconds for Midoriya's hands to begin glowing. Starting faint, the glow grew progressively brighter over the course of a minute. In a steady rhythm, the magazine began to duplicate one at a time every 10 seconds. When Hound Dog called time at the 5-minute mark, there was a considerable pile of magazines spilling out of Midoriya's hands onto the floor, albeit not as much as the pile of revolvers the day before. Midoriya released a long breath, slumping backwards onto the sofa. I don't think I can continue this. Take a break, Midoriya-kun. You did well. The teen wiped the sweat from his forehead. At least we know now neutral thoughts trigger a decent duplication. I agree, Midoriya-kun, Hound Dog nodded. However, this isn't all I wanted to talk about with you. As mentioned earlier, I have developed a two-pronged strategy for you to utilize your quirk safely. What we've just covered is the first prong. The second prong involves dealing with these dark thoughts directly. It is not healthy to harbor such thoughts long-term, so I hope that through our sessions, we are able to mitigate the effects of these thoughts on your daily life. The team consented. That's fine with me. So, how did your first session go? Quite productive, I have to say, Snipe-sensei, Midoria replied as he took another spoonful of food. We experimented with my quirk, and determined the best way to safely activate it is to use neutral thought triggers. And we also went through the plan to effectively deal with the dark thoughts. We delved into mindfulness exercises after the quirk experimentation, with the intention of delving deeper in the coming sessions. That's wonderful, kid. A moment of silence passed, before Midoria spoke again. Snipe-sensei, Hound Dog-san also said that exercise can help reduce the frequency of the dark thoughts. Aren't we already doing that even before your quirk manifested? Yes, but I'm talking about outdoor exercise, like running. Strength building is important, but so is cardio. I will need the stamina to sustain myself for long periods of time when fighting villains. Snipe rubbed his chin. You do have a point there. Why don't you research on places to run in Yuzutafu and get back Tommy on that? I will, Snipe-sensei. So once dinner was done and Midoria returned to his room, he turned on the laptop and began his research. It didn't take him long to find what he was looking for, albeit there was only one location available, Dogoa Municipal Beach Park. A beach park along the coastline would have been the best place for long runs to build up his stamina in addition to his workouts at Gym Gamma. Except for one major problem. Dogoa Beach could hardly call itself a beach. Not when the entire length of the coastline was piled high with years of garbage and pollution from illegal dumping and washed in from the ocean. The idea of running amidst the mountains of smelly, rotting waste was not only stupid, but incredibly dangerous. But what could he do? Dogoa was the only option unless he wanted to stick to treadmill running, which didn't carry all of the benefits of outdoor exercise. Midoria eyed the picture of the polluted beach consideringly. Reaching for his phone, he typed in Snipe's number and sent a call. Snipe-sensei? I found a location, but it's gonna need some work first. So hear me out. To be continued. Kid, are you sure you'll want to do this? I'm really sure, Snipe-san, Midoria replied back resolutely. I'll take whatever opportunity one can. The pair stood on the pavement overlooking Dogoa Beach. The miles of coastline piled high with mountains of rubbish, waste and other debris stood before them like impassable obstacles. The smell was also absolutely atrocious. Midoria was almost certain that some of the garbage had festered over the years, and he wouldn't be surprised if some more criminal individuals have left indigent corpses amidst the mountains of waste in the past. Snipe ruffled through a bag he brought along and pulled out a standard-issue, military-grade gas mask. Here you go, kid. I don't want you passing out from the toxic fumes. Thanks, Snipe-san. Midoria put the mask on, and while it certainly made breathing a bit more difficult, at least the odors were not as potent as they were without the mask. All right, let's focus on getting the smaller pieces of waste out, Midoria said. Do you have the rubbish bags, Snipe-san? 10 large rolls of it, kid. Right in here. The masked cowboy pulled out a roll from the bag. Let's get to it then. The pair spent the entire duration of daylight hours at Dogoa. They would use all 10 rolls of rubbish bags, but even then, they had barely made a dent in the overall state of the landfill by the time sundown came and it was time to return to Yui. That aside, Midoria was content. Not only was he doing a public service to the community, he knew that once he and Snipe moved on to the heavier trash that made up the majority of the piles, his body would undergo hell, but by the time the beach was cleaned, he hoped, he would have the strength, durability and resilience to handle all kinds of firearms without worrying about recoil or misfiring. It was definitely going to be torture for the next several months. But then again, Midoria has already gone through hell and back, so how was this any different? At least Snipe was there to make sure nothing went terribly wrong. He couldn't imagine doing this by himself, or perhaps even worse, with All Might watching over him. Midoria shuddered. That was a horrifying thought he certainly didn't want to entertain. It would take 2 weeks before Midoria and Snipe were able to move on to the larger pieces of garbage. With hefty lengths of rope, hooks and pulleys, the pair lifted the pieces carefully off the piles, not wanting to create a landslide of rubbish that could potentially kill them. Once the pieces were safely on the ground, Midoria tied more rope around them, and just like a mule, bridled the ropes around his body and physically dragged them up towards the collection point at the side of the road. The teen fully expected the job to be insanely difficult. He already had some muscle on his bones, but pumping weights in a controlled setting was far different than hauling big pieces of garbage out of a beach and up a slope. If he was lucky, he might be able to move about 5 pieces every 3 hours. Midoriya's bones, muscles and joints were always worn out by each day's end, and in the first few weeks, Snipe often had to carry him back to the car for the ride back to Yui. On the plus side, it always guaranteed a good night's sleep. Midoriya was simply too tired to keep his eyes open, which had the added benefit of keeping away the dark, intrusive thoughts that came with being idle. The routine was set, and the weeks bled into the first month on the task. A small but noticeable portion of Dogoa was cleared away, but a lot more work needed to be done if the beach was to return to its former pristine state. Then, halfway through the second month, something changed. Midoriya jumped, dropping the broken microwave he had been carrying. Snipe immediately had his modified firearm out and ready to shoot. I was wondering who was taking away all my scrap. A girl with pink shoulder-length hair tied in dreadlocks stormed up to the pair, seemingly unfazed by the firearm pointed directly at her. Yes? How may I help you? You can help me by telling me why you are stealing my scrap before I brain you with this wrench. The unknown girl pulled said tool from somewhere and brandished it like a weapon. Snipe turned his firearm towards the wrench as Midoriya tried damage control. Mississippi, I do not believe the trash here in Dogoa belongs to anyone, let alone you specifically. That's the point, the girl retorted. It belongs to nobody, therefore I have claimed the trash here as my own. Nobody wants rotting garbage and scrap anyway, so I might as well use it to make my babies. Snipe made a startled noise, nearly dropping his firearm. Behind his gas mask, Midoriya raised an eyebrow. Your babies? You make living things out of rotten garbage and scrap. Not literal babies, the girl huffed, hands on her hips. My inventions. I am Hatsume, only child and heir to the Hatsume Industries. I specialize in building support equipment for pro heroes and sidekicks. Snipe visibly sagged in relief. Midoriya continued, Hatsume-san, if I should call you that, you do know that people are going to think of something different if you call your inventions babies, right? Then they need to get their minds out of the gutter. Hatsume retorted, even so, they are like babies, aren't they? I create them and bring them to life. I'd suppose that is one way of thinking, Midoriya conceded. I'm glad you're catching up. Hatsume beamed. Now, are you going to tell me why you're stealing my scrap before I am forced to use the wrench? In our defense, Midoriya replied, we didn't know anyone was actually using the scrap here. My intention is to clear the beach to return it to its pristine state. I'm doing this as a form of muscle building and endurance training for the Yui entrance exam. Hold up, you're applying to Yui too? Hatsume's interest was piqued. Yes, the heroics course. The pink-haired girl fell into deep thought, before giving Midoriya a scrutinizing look. Your name? Midoriya Izuku. Quirk, if you have one? I don't have a name for it yet, but what it does is duplicate any part or component of a firearm. It also works on ammunition, if you also wanted to know. Hatsume fell into deep thought again, before asking, how fast can your quirk duplicate these objects? At my current optimum rate, I can duplicate a fully operational firearm in about a second, Midoriya replied. If it's ammunition, I'd say 10 bullets within the same time. Good enough for me, Hatsume declared, making Midoriya raise an eyebrow again. Midori, I hereby declare myself as your personal inventor. I will help you on your path to heroism, and you will help me by showing off my babies to the sponsors by winning the sports festival with nothing but them. Do we have a deal? The girl offered her hand to shake. Midoriya turned to his mentor, the latter looking a little unsure of the whole slew of developments that took place in a matter of minutes. Turning back to Hatsume, he said, You've got a deal, Hatsume-san. Midoria shook his new partner's hand, and he swore Hatsume's smile brightened until it rivaled the setting sun over the horizon. That girl's something, Snipe spoke as he drove back to Yui. I think she'll be an important partner, Midoria shrugged, typing into his phone. As cliched as this sounds, she has passion, a fire inside her to go beyond what was thought to be impossible. Her appearance alone describes the genius she is, and I think she is the kind of person to not give a single F to the rules. If I want to succeed as a pro hero, I will need allies. With her exceptional expertise, our power will be undeniable. Then came the whooshing sound effect of a message being sent. Hopefully she is free tomorrow, Midoria remarked, staring out of the window. I would love to see what her inventions are like. Snipe had his own opinions of the slightly unhinged girl that accosted them out of nowhere. But seeing how his mentee has had his mind set on it, he kept it quiet. He just hoped that they would come away from this fledgling partnership unscathed. Midoria had planned to meet Hatsume at Dogoa the next day close to sunset. Unlike him, she still had school to attend, which forced the decided timing. As the sun approached the horizon on its way down, Midoria had been moving trash for a few hours already, sorting them into both the rubbish bags and a pile of scrap that Hatsume requested. Both the teen and Snipe wondered how Hatsume was going to transport the sizable pile of scrap, and were met with an extremely unexpected answer, namely a banger of a pickup truck rolling up the road, with Hatsume at the driver's seat. Yo Midori and Snipe. Thanks for waiting. Hatsume-san, you do know the legal driving age in Japan is 18, right? Asked Midoriya. Of course, in ordinary circumstances, that is. Hatsume replied as she jumped out of the trunk and slammed the door behind her. You can thank my parents for that. A good word to the transport ministry and some dramatics later, and you've got special dispensation from the ministry to hold a driver's license at the age of 14. A few moments of stunned silence followed. Hatsume-san, I'd say that is iffy impossible, but knowing you, it is just another day for you. Got it one shot, Midori? Hatsume replied. Now, let's see what you've hauled up for me. The pink-haired girl pounced on the pile of scrap like an excited child diving into their presents on Christmas Day. She would spend at least 5 minutes rummaging through the pile, scanning and scrutinizing the pieces, leaving Midoriya and Snipe to engage in some quiet conversation to the side. I have to say, Midori, you have done me a great service today. I can make so many possibilities with these. Hatsume finally said, Now, let's get this back to the workshop. So much to see, so little time. It took about 20 minutes for the trio to haul the scrap onto the back of the pickup truck. Snipe took the front seat, and Midoriya the back. The truck rumbled and shuddered so wildly when the engine was turned on, Midoriya wondered if the vehicle was going to blow up where it stood. It didn't, but it did take an awful lot of time to get the truck moving. The journey itself took a little longer than expected, what with the less-than-ideal state of the truck and the evening rush-hour traffic. About 40 minutes later, they pulled up in what appeared to be a mixed-use building or warehouse in the industrial area of Mizudafu. It blended in well with the other factories, but there was something to it that, upon closer inspection, made it stand out from its peers. Welcome to Casa de May. You live here? Midoriya asked, opening the door. For the past 3 years, actually. Are your parents home? Asked Snipe. They don't live with me, Hatsume replied casually, dropping another bombshell that stopped the pro-hero and Midoriya in their tracks. They live in Kyoto. I've been an independent child for a year now. Hatsume-san. Midoriya found his voice after a moment. How do you survive? Oh, my parents send money to me every month, Hatsume brushed off. For school fees, utilities and groceries, the standard stuff. It's not like they threw me out of the house or anything, they just thought that I should learn how to live independently. Also, it gives me more space for me to put my babies together. I'd suppose that is as good a reason as any other, Midoriya remarked. A glance at Snipe's body language showed the hero shared the sentiment. All right, enough dilly-dallying. Hatsume clapped her hands together. Help me bring the scrap in, will you? They had to take multiple trips to get all the scrap into the warehouse. Once that was done, came the anticipated moment. This is the most important room in the entire building, where all my babies come to life. Hatsume said with a flourish, sliding the corrugated doors open, "Welcome to my workshop." To put things simply, Midoriya didn't know where to begin looking. The workshop took up the equivalent of a factory production room. Messy tables laden with materials, tools and parts took up much of the floor space. Cables hung overhead like vines along tree branches. At the furthest end of the room, there was a set of metal shelves that held boxes filled to the brim with all kinds of scrap, and at one corner that there appeared to be a miniature blast furnace. "This is amazing? Unbelievable," Hatsume suggested. "I know, right? This is where dreams come true. Tell me anything that you want made, and I will present it to you on a silver platter." Snipe turned to the excited girl. "Hatsume, you literally own all of this?" "Yep," she chirped. "Even the furnace back there is made by yours truly. Granted, some of the machines and tables were donated by my parents, but everything else? Tools, materials, all bought with the leftover money after necessities." Midoriya had one question in mind. "So, Hatsume-san, do you have any inventions you can show us?" "In a bit," the girl replied. "I want to show you a few blueprints first." Taking Midoriya's hand, Hatsume led him towards one of the tables, Snipe following behind. She pushed several random items off the tabletop to make some space, opened a drawer, and pulled out several rolled-up sheets of paper. Hatsume spread them out with a flourish. "What do you think?" Midoriya came closer to have a better look. If he could describe the visual before him, it looked like a firearm on steroids. Virtually all firearms had one nozzle where the bullet is released from. This one easily had 5. He went to another one. The shape only vaguely looked like a firearm, appearing more like something that came out of a video game. A quick scan through the other blueprints showed similar designs, several of which Midoriya, in all frankness, wondered how they could be used practically. "Interesting designs, I have to say," said the green-haired teen. "Thanks." Hatsume beamed. "I drew them up myself last night." "Last night?" Midoriya became concerned. "Hatsume-sen, did you sleep at all the night before?" Now that he looked closely, Midoriya could see the beginnings of dark circles under the girl's eyes. "Nope." Hatsume replied far too cheerily. "I'll sleep when I'm dead. Too much time is wasted, you know? 8 hours or so could be used for far more productive things, such as designing and putting my babies together." Midoriya and Snipe shared a look. Hatsume appeared to be speaking from experience, which meant that this wasn't the only time that she had foregone sleep. "But anyway," the pink-haired inventor brought the attention back towards her, "these are currently prototypes, based on the limited information you've told me about your quirk. But in order for them to come to actual fruition, I need to see your quirk in action, and also assess your shooting ability." Midoriya turned to Snipe. "Can we invite her to the range tomorrow?" "That's fine with me," the pro-hero replied. "But," he turned to Hatsume, who looked slightly confused. "Hatsume, you must promise us to get a full night's rest tonight, or else we won't allow you to come along with us." Hatsume spluttered. But that's not fair. How am I supposed to continue working on my babies if I sleep?" "Hatsume-san," Midoriya interjected, "you stayed up the whole of last night to make these blueprints. How did you even stay awake?" "With coffee, of course," the inventor replied, as if that was the most obvious answer in the world. "But I also added some Monster Energy, Red Bull, 5-Hour Energy, multiple off-brand sports drinks dash." The more Hatsume listed off, the more alarmed Midoriya and Snipe became. Taking drastic measures, Midoriya stepped forward and jabbed a finger into her neck. Hatsume froze, her eyes glazed over, and she crumpled to the ground, unconscious. Snipe's reaction was hidden by his mask. Midoriya simply replied, "She would not have listened if we tried to get her to see reason. She needs a long PRD of rest. This is the only way I could think of that was quick and efficient." It would take a few moments for the pro-hero to respond. "Let's just get her to bed." The pair carefully picked up the unconscious inventor, only to realize that they had no idea where her living quarters were. To be continued. It has come to my attention that this work was stolen and reposted over on fanfiction.net by someone named Repost234 without my knowledge or consent. I have already reported it to the FNet admins, But please, help me by not favoriting or leaving a review on that page. Even better, please send your own reports of abuse to the FNet admins to let them know of what is happening. You can do so by going to the URL, which I will link below, scrolling to the bottom of the page, and clicking the button labeled Actions. In the pop-up window, click Report Abuse. When the next pop-up window opens, under Select Violation Type, choose Not the Property of the Uploading Writer. Write a short message saying that it was originally my work and send it. I will continue to monitor the situation. Until the day that this work is taken down from fanfiction.net, there will be no new updates. Your help will ensure that this story will continue to be updated and get this BSTRD taken down. Thank you. Silent Ghostwriter 2017. https www.fanfiction.net S138363931 The Gunslinger Hero Marksman Chapter Text. We did it, everyone. The BSTRD has finally deleted all of the stories they had stolen. I will be unlocking both Jade Lightning and Gunslinger back for public viewing. Thank you so much, everyone, for reporting the BSTRD and ensuring that everyone can read the two stories again. Although we must always stay vigilant. This will not be the last time some thief will steal and repost my and others' stories under their names. If there is one takeaway from this debacle, I will be on the lookout, and your help as readers will be most appreciated. Happy reading, everyone. Silent Ghostwriter 2017 Chapter Text. Hey everyone. After 3 years and 5 months as Silent Ghostwriter 2017, the time has come for me to start anew. It has been a wild journey, story idea after story idea, a few getting completed and many more left to collect dust. I have enjoyed my share of successes and crippling failures. And it seemed, after the whole debacle over my attempt at creating a Natsuo Izuku story, I hit rock bottom from a combination of burnout, stress from my outside life, and stifling anxiety. It made me question my abilities as a writer, what would happen if I gave up writing because of the 3 aforementioned reasons, and, despite that, whether I should stop altogether and pick up another hobby. I spent the last 3 days doing intense self-introspection and soul-searching, confiding in people who lent me their ears on how to move forward. I eventually decided that I needed to start over. I made the mistake of taking on too many story ideas at once, depriving me of having an efficient update schedule and taking up more energy in my writing. So as of this announcement, Silent Ghostwriter 2017 will cease to exist. I will not delete this account, for I don't want to deprive all of you my stories. That being said, all of my stories, including the ones on indefinite hiatus, are up for adoption. Any one of you are free to take them and shape them into your own masterpiece as you wish. As for what will happen to me, I'll be taking a break to give myself time to recalibrate. There is a strong likelihood that I will return sometime in the near future under a different pseudonym, so I hope to one day see you all again through your comments and feedback. I'm going to rest now. Until next time, happy reading. Silent Ghostwriter 2017.